Chapter 41, School Festival. In the next half hour, the entire Yakuza group was arrested en masse by the police gathered by Naite. Midoriya was sitting in Overhaul's office when Naite bursts in. He looked at Midoriya sitting in a leather chair with a white-haired little girl hugging him asleep while reading the research papers Overhaul had given him. Speaking of Overhaul, he was standing by the side of the chair like a butler. Overhaul had taken off his mask and gloves and he was slightly shaking while standing by, but his face did not show his discomfort. To the side of the room was a pile of unconscious bodies still tied up. Invincible, can you tell me why I'm seeing any of this? I needed to kill time until you got here, so what else was I supposed to do? You could have helped us with the rest of the Yakuza upstairs, and why is Overhaul shivering while serving you like a butler? You could have handled it and I got a gift from the higher-ups. Sai, just get these villains upstairs. Alright, it's been fun having you as my butler. Dispel. Overhaul immediately dropped to the ground and started to look around for something. Not finding it, he started to freak out. And not clean. He started to claw into his face where Midoriya touched him, so Midoriya stopped him immediately by re-establishing control. Overhaul calms down and pulls a handkerchief out to wipe his face. I apologize for having you see that, my king. No worries. Midoriya touches Overhaul and uses his quirk to heal his face, causing him to squirm slightly. Naite looked at the scene with an incredulous expression. We're leaving. Appearing outside using a warp gate carrying Eri in his arms, there was a large perimeter of police and emergency vehicles on standby. Naite came through the gate and called some police to escort the tied-up villains. An EMT ran up to Midoriya to check on the girl in his arms. Looking her over, they wanted to check under the bandages, so they told Midoriya to wake her up. Midoriya gently stirred her awake. Eri opened her eyes and was startled by the change of scenery. Her new wings burst out from her back and wrapped themselves around both her and Midoriya. Eri, it's okay, they're here to help. Eri slowly retracted the wing, looking at the people around her wearily. They'll need to check under the bandages, is that okay? Eri looked scared. Just don't leave, okay? I'll be just by your side. The EMT slowly and gently removed the bandages. Her arms and legs were covered in old scars older than her. They looked almost fake, like someone just painted them on. Eri flinched when the EMT got closer to check on the scars. Hey Eri, it's okay. Do you want to sleep until they're done checking? She nods. Sleep. She closes her eyes and falls asleep. The EMT continued the checkup and determined that she was malnourished and lacked nutrients that she would normally get if she was outside regularly. They recommended that Midoriya go with the girl to the hospital for further testing. Midoriya left the scene, noticing the people who had their phones up recording. The next day the whole incident was broadcasted on the news. Hero trainee Invincible takes down Yakuza group was an attractive headline for many. Naite publicized the report for the incident, which stated that Invincible, while disguised, encountered the leader of the Yakuza group and discovered that they were using the biological material of a little girl to create quirk-destroying drugs along with the antidote to build a monopoly rise to power, with the ultimate goal of the complete eradication of quirks. The entire Yakuza group was taken into custody mostly peacefully as the elites were preoccupied by Invincible. The public reacted to the report positively, as only the end of the operation was recorded by the public, meaning that the matter was handled quietly and not disrupting their day-to-day lives with damaged roads and buildings. Video of Invincible gently caring for the little girl had garnered a sizable female fanbase, and along came speculation of his love life. Shirtless photos from the sports festival had become popular online as his stans made fan edits or thirsted for him. Eri had been taken into UA and adopted by Nizu, who allowed 13 Cementos and Midoriya to help look after the child while he took over her education. He found it a nice challenge, as he hadn't had the opportunity to teach a child so young. To truly see how he could mold the next generation. Tenko and his group have been in therapy. The ones who needed it most were mainly Twice, who was still suffering from years of fear and paranoia, and Toga, who had issues with their quirk messing with her psyche. Dabi, on the other hand, was struggling to decide if he wanted to reveal himself to Todoroki. They weren't a danger to the public anymore, but they had a long way to go before they could join them. The vials of quirk-destroying drugs were given to Nizu, as Izuku trusted him to keep them safe for the future. What he was going to do with them was now his prerogative. 2 months passed and UA was having their annual school festival, where the school is open to the public and classes are encouraged to conduct an event. Class 1A was in the dorms discussing what they were going to do. Mineta immediately suggested they do a maid cafe, which was soundly rejected by the girls. Midoriya then piped up to suggest something. Building off of Mineta's idea, how about a themed restaurant? The class can sell food themed after themselves, which can be a nice boost to their image. The class began excitedly thinking of what foods they would best represent them. Momo created some pen and paper to write down some of the ideas. Mineta, though disappointed they weren't doing a maid cafe, was satisfied with them wearing their hero costumes. He subconsciously voiced the thought, resulting in Tsuyu smacking him in the back of his head. After a few days, their plan was finalized. The menu consisted of 20 items each based on each of the class members. One of the more unique ones was Todoroki's fried ice cream, which was a blob of ice cream wrapped in a pastry that is fried together for a few seconds. This was suggested by Midoriya, as Todoroki only wanted cold soba as his dish, which didn't fit a cafe menu. Along with that was Bakugo's hot blast ice cream, which had hot sauce as a main ingredient. Many in the class felt that the ice cream would be disgusting, but after trying it, it tasted pretty good and they liked the unique flavor experience. The class was decorated with their respective colors and signature gadgets. Midoriya was going to be the main chef, using his clones to fill up the kitchen staff while the rest of the class focused on serving the guests. Sato was having trouble deciding on a single dish, so he will be running his own confectionery, making the pastries. Kaminari suggested they have live music playing and nominated Jiro to provide. She initially refused to do it, but after a few more in the class decided to join her, she agreed. Before the performance, the girls will be the main force pulling in customers, but since there were so few of them, Midoriya decided to try something to help them out. His body starts to mold and shift as sounds of writhing flesh cause some to go green in the face. After it was done, Midoriya looked a lot more feminine, assets included, which Mineta screeched excitedly about. Searching for a mirror, Midoriya sees image. Midoriya was surprised by the change and began to check herself out. The girls were also excited by this and decided to have this form dubbed as Girldoriya, walking around the festival advertising the cafe. The day of the festival came as Wana was making final preparations. They were missing a few ingredients as some in the class tried to help cook some of the items. Midoriya left some clones in the class to help set up the cafe while he went out to the supermarket. After getting the supplies, Midoriya decided to walk back to UA to do an impromptu patrol. Walking by a cafe, he sees a recognizable duo. An older gentleman wearing a fancy getup, and a smaller red-haired woman in much the same clothes at a tea shop. These two were the Gentle Criminal and La Brava, who were quite popular on the internet for recording their schemes. Midoriya warped the groceries back to UA and walked up to them. Gentle, spotting Invincible walking up to their table, quickly grabbed La Brava and took off into the air right into a warp gate. Appearing in front of Invincible, Gentle put La Brava behind him. "Hey," Gentle just wanted to talk. Gentle looked confused. Usually heroes would be telling them that they were under arrest. "Why are the both of you out and about in your costumes?" Gentle was compelled to answer. "We were going to infiltrate UA's festival to show that civilians aren't safe." Gentle quickly tried to cover his mouth after he spoke. "Then we're going to have a problem. Going around and messing with a festival isn't going to spread your message to the right people. I get what you're trying to do, but if it will hurt the public, you will be simply branded as villains." Gentle tried to run again, but both he and La Brava were immediately wrapped in green bands, preventing them from moving. "Sorry about this, but you're not being arrested. I just have someone who would love to meet you." Warping them back into UA, they appeared just outside of Nizu's office. The doors opened to the office where Nizu was looking through some documents. Looking up to see the villain duo tried up by Midoriya, he knew that it was going to be a busy week. Leaving Nizu to handle the criminals, Midoriya returned to the cafe to see it in full swing. Packed tables full of satisfied customers. A few younger men were keeping their eye on the Girldoriya clones who were walking by, passing out flyers. Many of them were driven off by Mineta, who called them all pedos for leering at underage girls. Midoriya jumped in behind the kitchens to see how operations were running. The kitchen was open to the dining room, providing a spectacle as their food was created by clones with a variety of quirks to speed up the cooking process. It was nearing noon when Cementos walked in with Eri, who was looking around in wonder at the decorated cafe. Midoriya Prime walked out to greet them. Eri saw him and excitedly ran up and hugged him. "Hey Eri, how were you enjoying the festival?" She began to excitedly and quickly explain all that she saw today, but she mentioned that she couldn't wait to see the restaurant when she saw the Girlderia clones. Midoriya led both Cementos and Eri to an open table and told them to order whatever they wished. Cementos wanted Ida Zoom Zoom coffee and Eri wanted Midoriya's dish, which was a green caramel apple with rainbow sprinkles along with Aoyama's Sparkle Sparkle Splash. After a few minutes, their orders were ready. Eri was wowed by the sparkly apples and drink while Cementos comfortably enjoyed his coffee. Eri carefully took a bite of the apple and her face lit up in glowing happiness. As Eri was eating, the show was about to start. The light dimmed and spotlights pointed at the stage. Jiro was on the mic and bass with Kaminari and Tokoyami on the guitar, Momo on the piano and surprisingly Bakugo on the drums. They performed a song personally written by Jiro. The guests fell into the atmosphere of the performance and began to dance. Eri was a bit uncomfortable with the large crowd, so Midoriya picked her up and placed her on his shoulders. The special effects on stage were managed by Mineta along with a clone to help make sure everything went well. After the performance, the crowd cheered as the musicians bowed in thanks. Chapter 42, Joint Training. Months pass as Todoroki and Bakugo went to their remedial lessons for their provisional licenses. They have been going to them diligently, though Bakugo keeps harping on about everyone else not slacking off so that he will be challenged by the class. The hero billboard chart JP was drawing near. Everyone except for Todoroki was in the lounge waiting for the event to begin. The class was speculating on who was going to be in the top 10. Of course, All Might was still number 1, though at a decreased capacity. The event began as the announcer started it off. The top 10 were introduced in descending order, starting with number 10, who was Gang Orca, who was followed by the rest of the top 10s. Each hero spoke of their new goals or a reinforcement of their resolve. At number 1 was All Might, who went on stage in Small Might form. The audience quieted down as he was given the microphone. "Hello everyone, I am here for maybe the last time. My time limit has been dropping as I wind down my activities as a hero. I have been this nation's symbol for 35 years, upholding the peace for all that time. I said many years ago that new heroes will need to rise to hold up this society. The time has come and I look forward to seeing what they all could do. Go beyond. Plus Ultra. Plus Ultra. Die All Might." A gun barrel could be seen above the crowd as it fired. Time slowed as the crowd waited for the shot to land, but it never did. In the path of the bullet appeared a green portal swallowing the bullet. The crowd looked at the portal as it vanished. In front of the assailant, a larger green portal opened and from it Invincible walked through. The attacker fired his gun at him, but every bullet that hit him crumpled and fell to the floor. Midoriya grabbed them by the neck and used confession. "Who are you with?" "What? I'm alone." Fiction. Midoriya's eyes widen as he uses barrier to cover the entire hall and stage. A bullet impacts the outside of the barrier, causing it to ripple. Midoriya scanned the outside and found a sniper on a rooftop quickly packing away their weapon. Warping him into the barrier without his gun, he is wrapped in green construct bands that extend to the ground to keep him upright. The same happens to the first assailant. "Now this is all of you." Fact. Just then security pushed their way to Midoriya's location and cuffed the attackers while thanking Midoriya for his help. One of the onlookers walked up to Midoriya, phones in hand. "Hi, Chitose Kazuki from Shueisha Publishing. I think I speak for everyone in the nation that we thank you for protecting All Might. I wanted to ask you, why did you step in? Surely there are security measures that would have ensured that All Might was protected. When I saw the barrel in the crowd, I knew I needed to act. All Might had already used his time for the day, and using any more would have further reduced the time he had as a hero. I stepped in because who wouldn't? I'm sure everyone watching, even the heroes on stage, wanted to step in even if they were the ones that would have gotten shot." "I see. Will you be staying for the rest of the event?" "No, I won't. I'll need to go back to the dorms. They should be very surprised that I just disappeared from the couch. Wait, before you go. Do you have anything to say to the villains that plan to strike All Might again?" Midoriya looked around and found the camera recording the event. Looking straight into the camera as it zoomed closer. "To those who hide in shadow. To those who scurry when the light hits your deadened eyes, clouded with the desire to maim and do evil. Your time draws near, for we will always be here." A warp gate appears behind Midoriya, swallowing him whole, leaving behind an empty space where he once was. A few days had passed and the expected rise in crimes was a lot lower than the public expected from the supposed last appearance of the symbol of peace. The attempted assassination of the retiring All Might had shocked the nation as well as the sudden intrusion of Invincible. Shueisha Publishing released their impromptu interview with Invincible. The public agreed with his opinions and there was speculation that Midoriya was more than ready to replace All Might as the new symbol of peace or at least the new #1 hero. The recording of Invincible stopping the would-be assassins was making rounds on news stations and the internet. The most impactful part of it was his final lines directed at the villains. Many felt like it was something every hero should aspire to, become so great villains dare not approach the light of peace. Invincible's fame skyrocketed after the event. The successor of the symbol of peace, a title that was tacked onto his already lofty hero name. Every day Midoriya had to warp to places and use doppelganger if he was outside of UA, as people would be waiting to spot him and alert a massive crowd who wanted the autograph of a rising hero. His reluctance only encouraged them, as if one of them could get it then that was the only chance they get a rare item from a rising hero. Now in one of the mock cities the classes 1A and 1B were gathered in front of their homeroom teachers. Today was a special training day as the two classes will be working together as a team to defeat villains. The class was wondering who the villain would be until they noticed that Midoriya was gone from where he was standing before. "I'm glad you have caught on quickly. Today's training will be against a villain who has an overwhelming advantage against you all. He wins if he destroys the city, eliminates all civilians, and beats or captures all of you, while the classes win if they can save 50% of the civilians or defeat the villain. Midoriya will be limited to All Might's fighting style during his exam to give you all a bit of an edge." The students nodded and began planning their approach. Bakugo, being the arrogant hothead he was, found their planning stupid and wanted to just rush at Midoriya. When the class told him that was just going to get him eliminated, it got under his skin. When the training started, he blasted himself into the city. The plan that the classes had come up with was to have their strongest run interference while the rest of them tried to save as many civilians as possible. Just as the classes were about to split up, something fell from the sky into the middle of their group. It was the body of Bakugo, unconscious. The classes looked around trying to find Midoriya, but he was nowhere to be seen. Bakugo was carried away by some Medibots as the class spread out into the city. The distraction team consisted of the strongest in class, i.e. people who could tank a hit and run away. As the group was running through the city, an air blast launched them back. They looked up to see buildings destroyed in a cone shape, and at the end of it, Midoriya stood casually. Before any of them could think, Midoriya was already in front of them. "They send a force this small to stop me. What a joke." Midoriya flicks, pushing the air in front of him and pushing the assault group into the ground. Kirishima pushed himself up quickly and rushed Midoriya, who just stood there, and took it. Kirishima kept punching and punching, but the blows did nothing to Midoriya, though it had brought some time for the others to get up. They too began to hit Midoriya, having the same effect. A few of them backed off as a wave of ice traveled and encased Midoriya in a gigantic glacier. Breaking out of it, Midoriya saw that the group was gone. The rest of the class was transporting the civilians to the rescue zone when 20% of civilians have been eliminated. The announcement startled the classes. It had barely been a few minutes and they only had 80% left in the game. The class was starting to panic, but Momo got them under control and they kept to the plan. After a few minutes they had saved 45% of the civilians and started to rush for the final 5%. They searched around the entire city, but they found no one, that is until they spotted Midoriya standing in the plaza surrounded by the remaining civilians. "What do we do now? He for sure already saw us. Some of us will have to distract him enough so the rest of us can save as many civilians as possible." The classes nod. They send anyone with a ranged quirk which can cause dust to float and obscure Midoriya's vision. Once they were ready, they all fired at once. From all around Midoriya were a variety of quirks and a few smoke bombs which obscured both him and the civilians. The heroes rush in, but before they can grab any of the civilians, the dust is blasted away, revealing Midoriya standing there with his hands together alone, now surrounded by the classes. 50% of civilians have been eliminated. The classes were shocked by this. Where were the remaining civilians? They had checked every building. Finally things can get exciting. You all have been running around like rats, avoiding me like the plague. Now, I think it's time I actually hunt. Midoriya disappeared and reappeared with the ranged assault group unconscious around him. The remaining heroes looked apprehensive but stood ready to face whatever was next, making Midoriya smile at the sight. He disappears once more, this time taking each and every one down one by one, causing some in the group to lose their cool and run, but they never get far as they become the next targets. Eventually, only Midoriya remained standing around unconscious bodies. Villain wins. Midoriya warped the unconscious students to a recovery tent where he was reprimanded by Recovery Girl for making her stay late. Bakugo was the first to wake up. He looked around, still ready to fight. Midoriya wrapped him in green bands so he wouldn't destroy anything. Calm down. The training is over. Bakugo's face dropped and anger reappeared. What the hell happened? Bakugo looked around the room, seeing the still unconscious class. They needed your help. You could have been the key to this, but you faced me alone. If all of them couldn't do anything, then they are just weak. And what does that say about you? You left them behind so you could prove that you were the best. That you could finish this exercise before they get the chance to encounter me. I knocked you out, picked up your unconscious body and threw you into the group. Do you know what happened? They got too cautious. They would never risk getting closer to you. That's right. They weren't willing to take risks because they didn't want to end up like you. A missing piece. A liability. They needed all the strength they had, and you threw that notion away for what? Your pride. They needed someone who knew me. Knew how I moved. How I would handle this exercise. But I don't know a damn thing about you. Ever since you got here, you've only gotten stronger and stronger. Every step of the way you were always in mine. The first training, USJ, the sports festival, Stain, Island. After All for One, I didn't know what to think. All Might had said he was going to retire. To give up after everything. I couldn't be like him, I have to be number one forever and always. Winning and being on top doesn't have to be all there is to be a hero. Hasn't UA shown you that? Hasn't All Might shown you that? There are a lot more different heroes other than All Might. Winning doesn't just mean beating villains. 'Cause even if the villain is captured, if civilians are dead, then it will always be a tragedy. Your desire to win is not the problem, it's your focus. If all you care about is winning, you will find nothing but resentment for everyone better than you in any way you perceive. Bakugo was quiet for a moment, thinking of the past before UA. He remembers first learning of Midoriya's quirk. It was weak, sure, but subconsciously he knew it would grow to surpass him. He tried to beat the nerd down, but all that did was make him stronger. By the time they were in middle school, groups of people from other schools regularly challenged Midoriya to a fight, with Midoriya always coming out stronger every time. He wanted to be the best, but the game was rigged from the start. He felt unlucky he wasn't born with Midoriya's quirk. He wanted all that strength, the invulnerability, and the presence he exuded when he faced villains. The fight with All for One was a prime example of such. Through all the attempts by the heroes to stop the beast that was All for One, Midoriya stood tall facing a monster and with a single blow defeated what All Might failed to. He looked back at Midoriya and spoke with a soft tone. "Leave me alone." Midoriya silently got up and left, leaving Bakugo to his thoughts. Chapter 43, Nabo Island. It was after Christmas when the class was to open up a hero agency on Nabo Island. They were to stay there until a suitable hero could take over their duties. The class was excited when they heard where they were going. Many of them thought it would be a nice vacation away from all the chaos. It has been a week since then, and seeing that the island had around 1,000 inhabitants, the class has been handling small tasks for the locals around the island. The class was stationed in an old building, taking calls and going out to aid when available. Midoriya had mostly been playing chaperone, warping the class around the island to where they needed to be. One of the calls was for a missing child named Katsuma Shimano. Most of the class was out, so Midoriya decided to take it. Warping into the air, he looked down onto the island looking for the little boy. He found him on a hill near the edge of town overlooking the harbor and flew down to him. "Hey, are you Katsuma?" The boy looked excited to see Izuku, but before he could respond, a little girl slid down a slide and stood between the two of them. "What kind of hero are you? Look how long it took you to get here." She showed her phone to Midoriya. It displayed a timer reading 7 minutes and 32 seconds. "I'd say that's pretty good, though I'm an exception. Not every hero can fly and teleport." Still something could have happened when you were searching. "Come on Katsuma, let's leave these lazy heroes." The boy, looking unsure, followed after the girl. Midoriya shook his head and sighed. That little girl who goes by Mahoru Shimano seemed to have a thing for hating heroes ever since they arrived on the island. Always dragging her brother along with her schemes. Midoriya's phone rang as someone needed to get back to base. It was the end of the day. Everyone was tired from running around all day minus Midoriya, who was never tried for too long, and Bakugo, who just stayed at base reading magazines with the excuse of guarding the agency from villains. From the hallway, many of the townspeople came in carrying plates of food as a thank you for their hard work, which the class appreciated. Later at night, Midoriya was in the air relaxing overlooking the lit-up town when Midoriya spotted Katsuma running towards the agency building. Flying down toward him, Katsuma quickly yelled at Midoriya. "There's a villain in the castle ruins. You want to come with me to check it out?" The boy nods as Izuku opens a warp gate to the ruins. Walking through, Izuku sees a giant mantis thing in the distance. The villain sees them and runs towards Izuku, who flicks sending an air cannon at the beast. The blast goes through the beast, not affecting it or the blast like it was intangible. Izuku looks around using quirk sight and sees Mahoru hidden behind a wall. The mantis lunges at Midoriya, its claw aiming to strike him down, but it goes right through him. Mahoru gets out of her hiding spot with a pout. "Can't you at least act scared?" "Can't really do that when I know what your quirk is." "It's pretty good. You could summon any hero you want to scare off bad guys." "Then why can't I scare you?" "Maybe I'm not scared of mantises." Her pout deepens as she drags Katsuma away. "Bye, Mr. Invincible. Have a nice night, Katsuma." The next day came around. Midoriya woke up pretty early and did his morning routine. After his run, he had his breakfast as he scanned around the island. Looking out toward the direction of the harbor, he sees something he thought he dealt with. All for one, but it looked minuscule, surrounded by 5 quirks along with another quirk to the side by itself. Midoriya ate the rest of his food, put on his hero costume, and messaged the class that he was going to check something out. Warping above where he saw the quirks, he sees a ferry with only 4 people who were on the bridge. Using warp gate, Midoriya teleported the vessel closer to the middle of the ocean. The villains noticed this and ran up to the top deck, looking around to see who moved them. Midoriya turned off flight and fell straight down onto the top deck and stopped with a quiet thud as soon as his feet touched the deck, like stepping down from a curb. He walked towards the white-haired villain who had all for one and used confession. "Welcome to the middle of the Sea of Japan. What were you doing going to Nabo Island?" "I am here to get a quirk to bring me back to full health." "Who are you?" "Seeing that you need to ask that while your groupies are tense tells me you've been under a rock." "I'm the unstoppable hero, Invincible, and I was the one that took down All for One. I can assume the good doctor had given you All for One even if it's a weakened copy." The villain activated scanning as his eyes turned yellow. Looking at Invincible, he sees a rainbow of flame shooting into the air. He had never seen anything like this before and it scared him. He turned around to try and run, but Invincible was already in front of him, blocking his way. The villain raised his hands and fired light purple lasers from his fingertips. The shots curve around Invincible to try and find a weak point. The laser exploded on contact, obscuring him from view and making the villain take a step back. Everyone surround him. "He's not down yet." The other members ran around the dust cloud, vigilant of any changes. The dust slowly cleared, revealing Invincible completely unharmed. "That's interesting. I have something quite similar. Impure beam plus dark ball." Invincible raised a finger as a dark ball floated at the tip of it. A dark purple laser shot out at the white-haired villain, who raised multiple yellow barriers to stop the attack. The laser pierced through and broke a few layers but didn't get all the way through. The villain was breathing heavily with purple veins running across his face. The red-headed girl of the group ran towards him. "9, are you okay?" "I'm fine, Slice. Keep your eye on him." "I just need to get close." "Oh, no need for all the fanfare. Come as close as you like. In fact, I'll let you touch me." 9 looked confused but decided to not do what he said as Invincible reached his hand out. The other 2 seemed to have gotten impatient during the standoff as red mummies connected to one of them rushed Invincible, who simply waved his arm, causing the mummies to unravel. The other member had a wolf-like mutation quirk with bird talons for hands, tried to punch him, but as his fist made contact it had no effect. Slice, seeing this, fired strands of hair from her head at Invincible, which also explodes. With a dust cloud obscuring Invincible's vision, the villains spread apart to find a way to escape the ship. The wolfman tried to fly away with his newly grown wings, but green constructs grabbed onto him and pulled him towards Invincible, who grabbed him by his head, taking his quirk. Chimera taken. Upon losing his quirk, the monstrous features he had reseeded revealed a large black man with the same dreadlocks he had before. He fell to the ground on his hands and knees, looking at his changed form. What did you do to me? I took away your quirk. Tell me, why do you follow 9? He spared me after decimating a city. He said he saw in me what he once was. Ostracized for something we had no control over. I followed so that we can show them who is truly at the top of the food chain. Sleep. The man falls unconscious and is sent off to the agency's holding cell. Invincible looked around and the other 3 were already gone. So much for camaraderie. Using quirk sight, he sees 9 and Slice walking slowly on the lower deck and the mummy guy walking around and creating more mummies. Deciding to save the best for last, he warped to his location. The villain was running around using their quirk on any object in sight until he bumped into Invincible, who appeared in front of him. Quickly he sent his golems at him, which were easily smacked away, causing them to unravel. The man panicked, sending his minions at Invincible while trying to run away. Eventually, he finds himself at a dead end with a few minions to his name. He turns around to see Invincible looking at him with a bored look. Well, I guess this is the end of the line. The villain doesn't respond as he sends his red bandages at Invincible, wrapping them around him. The tension in the villain's shoulders disappears after seeing him converted. Sigh, for all the strength, you're pretty careless. The bandages suddenly exploded, burning the bandages in blue flame. The villain's eyes widen as he backs away into a wall. Yeah, that's on purpose, like how you led me to believe you had no more tricks. Invincible grabbed onto his head and took his quirk. Mummy taken. Sleep. The villain falls unconscious and is sent to the holding cell as well. Walking out from the depths of the ferry, he sees a small lifeboat driving away quickly. Opening a warp gate in front of it, it didn't have a chance to steer clear from the portal, which sent them crashing back onto the top deck. Invincible warped himself up there and saw 9 on the floor with Slice trying to help him up. That's enough games. It's time the both of you not run like cowards. 9 gets up, supported by Slice. Standing fully, he pushes himself off of her. Then what are we supposed to do? You've already gotten Chimera and Mummy. Your intrepid leader still hasn't shown me his full strength. Like that weather quirk he's got. 9 furrowed his brow, his eyes glowed red as the clouds above collected and darkened. Flashes of light could be seen in the spinning mass. Lightning came crashing down on Invincible, arching across the surface of the deck, making it glow red hot. Midoriya stood in the middle of the destruction, lightning still arching across his body. Not be dash. 2 large blue metallic serpents flew at him, crashing into his palms with a loud clang. Bad, and along with this I can see why you took the quirks you did. Unfortunately, I'm going to need you to return them. Midoriya appeared in front of 9, his hand near his face, but an explosion launched 9 away. 9 was pointing the yellow barrier at Invincible. Slice was now right next to Invincible. She turned her hair into large blades, slashing and stabbing at him, but every strike glanced off his body, causing sparks to fly off. In the middle of the flurry, an arm reached out and grabbed onto Slice's face. Slice taken. Sleep. Slice falls unconscious, her hair falling limp as she is warped away. Invincible looked toward 9 and slowly walked toward him. 9 looked at the scene with fear and a tinge of irony. So this is how hopeless it felt for them to fight me. 9 responded by using every offensive ability he has. Not seeing a point in not going all out, the purple tubes on 9's back began to inject their contents into 9, making the markings on his face recede, and he took off his mask, revealing an angry scowl. His eyes glowed red and the clouds above intensified, and he raised his hand and summoned the yellow shield, which shot out an air cannon at Invincible. The cannon blew some of his hair back, but otherwise, it looked like a gust of wind blew by. Purple lasers fired from 9's hands, trying to shoot Invincible away, but he just walked through them unaffected as the lasers curved around his body. The metallic serpents flew at Invincible, striking like snakes as lightning from above channeled through the serpents, increasing their speed. The onslaught continued until Invincible was standing a few feet from a tired and almost completely purple 9, panting heavily and barely standing, looking at Invincible, who had a bored expression on his face. Anything you want to say before this all ends? I was going to change this world. No one would have to feel like they don't belong. That is a noble goal. Unfortunately, you done it entirely the wrong way. Midoriya placed his hand on his head. Weather manipulation taken. All for one, weakened, taken. Scanning taken. Hydra taken. Air wall taken. Bullet laser taken. Cell activation, type A, taken. Sleep. Warping 9 back to base. Midoriya gets a call. Hello, Midoriya speaking. Midoriya, where are you right now? Oh, just the middle of the ocean. Did our villains take the restraints well? They seemed so, out of it when they got here. What did you do to them? I just roughed them up a little, they'll be fine. I'll be right back, I need to park the ship they stole. When Midoriya returned on the ferry, the townspeople were at first confused why a ferry was coming to the island so early. Midoriya flew above the ferry and landed near the crowd to explain the situation. After hearing the whole explanation, the townspeople were glad that the villains were not able to get onto the island and thanked Midoriya for his work. After making sure the ferry was properly secured, he warped back to the agency for another debriefing to the class. Everyone was glad that the villains were taken care of, though Bakugo was mad he didn't get a hit in. After that, Midoriya warped back into UA in Nizu's office, surprising the Chimera for a moment. Midoriya, what a surprise. Has your time on the island been fruitful? It is a nice change of pace, but that's not why I'm here. I'm guessing you know about 9. Of course. Did you encounter him? Is the class safe? Yeah, they are fine. I was able to intercept them before they were able to get on the island. I wanted to know if you can get me in contact with the people 9 stole from. Nizu was able to do so, and Midoriya visited each and every one to return what was taken from them. All of them were extremely grateful to have their quirks back. After returning all but one, he warped back into the island. The rest of their time there went pretty well. Katsuma had been showing up a lot more near Midoriya, always watching him help out around the town with an inspired look in his eye. Hey, Katsuma. Hi, sir. Oh, don't call me that. It makes me feel old. That's an edge shot pin you have. You really like heroes, don't you? I want to be a hero. Just like Daddy. That is a great dream to have. What kind of hero is your dad? The greatest. I'm going to be just like him. Then you're gonna need to train. You're going to need to be strong enough to save everyone. But my quirk isn't strong. Don't talk about your quirk like that. You haven't even used it to its full potential. What do you mean? My quirk only heals other people and myself. Big Sis just wants me to stay and be a doctor. That's the key, being able to heal yourself. Do you know how muscles grow? Not really. Then we have much to work on. For the next few days, Midoriya taught Katsuma how to train his body while making the best use of his quirk to solidify his progress and efficiency. Katsuma and Mahoro's dad came back after recovering from the villain attack. When the trio got home, Midoriya was standing at the pathway leading to their home. Hello, hero, what caused you to visit us? Just here to return something. Midoriya held his hand out to the confused father, who took it. The man felt weird for a second before feeling whole. He breathed out a sigh, releasing a tension he didn't know he had. What did you do to Daddy? Your dad had his quirk taken by a villain. I'm just giving it back like I did for the other quirks he stole. The kids happily hugged and thanked Midoriya for helping their dad. After a while, it was time to leave. The class got onto their ferry and was slowly pulling out of the harbor. The entire village came and waved them off, thanking them for their time there. On the way back, Midoriya was seemingly lost in thought, looking at his hand, which had a small red orb surrounded by lightning. Chapter 44, Interview Training. After returning from Nabu Island, classes resumed as normal. The time they spent there was fruitful and relaxing, not counting the thwarted villain attack on the island. The media had gotten wind of the incident and praised Midoriya for handling it without disrupting the townspeople's lives. The actual fight wasn't recorded, but reports were released by the HPSC to set the public record straight. Midoriya was now in Nizu's office with Nizu, All Might, Naite, and Grant Torino. They were all sitting by the coffee table with a cup of tea in hand, pondering what Midoriya had told them. You want to give away all for one? Why? Do you want another Shigaraki to appear? Yes and no, Sasaki. When I said to All Might no one should shoulder the burden of peace alone, I meant it. But you will be around for a long time. Even then you could make clones of yourself and the current heroes to keep the world safe. While that is true, they will still be all a result of me. I alone would be in control of worldwide safety. I don't want to take away the dreams of so many. If I alone stand against evil, then progress will stagnate more than it already has. Every problem could be solved just by calling invincible. It will bring an end to progress. Then who do you think should get all for one? There was a kid on Nabu Island, Katsuma. His quirk is cell activation, which allows him to activate the cells in his own and others' bodies to accelerate healing. 9 was heavily modified when I met him, and he had a weaker variant of all for one, so whoever will get the quirk will need to survive a bit of pain from either their own quirk changing their body or me using overhaul to keep them alive long enough for that to happen. How about Melissa? She would love to be able to research the quirk. I could give it to her, but she will need to consent to the procedure and be informed of the risks of it. In the meantime, I'll keep looking for potential candidates. The group agreed to the proposal, but Nisa stipulated that he be the first to be informed of them to do a background check. But that wasn't all that they were going to discuss today. All Might, I think I've gotten a hang of overhaul and rewind to bring you back into your prime. Do you still want to stay number 1 for a bit longer? Your embers are almost gone. I would want nothing more, Midoriya. We should get to Recovery Girl first before we do anything. Lord knows that she'll throw a fit if she wasn't there to monitor your vitals. The procedure went well, having aged All Might back into his prime, but that couldn't be said for the embers. His time limit had increased from his previous 1 hour 40 to 3 hours. His small form no longer existed, but he had a new medium form nicknamed Some Might. After confirming his new limits, he tried to run out to do some hero work but was pulled by the ear by both Recovery Girl and Gran Torino. Getting sat down, Recovery Girl began to explain his new routine. To make sure he was fully healthy, he had to be monitored for a few days and be kept on a controlled diet, as he hadn't been able to eat much of anything without his stomach. It was around this time where Todoroki and Bakugo's interview was premiered. Earlier in the month, they were interviewed in the dorms. The interview was a disaster, as only recordings of Todoroki made it to air. Bakugo was completely removed from the broadcast due to his violent language. While Todoroki was shown, he wasn't interview material, only giving single-word answers to every question. The class had a good laugh at their expense, with Bakugo digging his grave deeper and Todoroki confused why the way he acted was odd. The next day everyone was in class waiting for their afternoon training to start. When MT Lady and Midnight walked in. Students, I'm sure you recognize who this is. She is MT Lady, and she will be assisted by Midnight, and they will be helping you prepare for how you present yourselves in front of the media to the public. Hey everyone, as Aizawa said, I will be your guide to constructing a good public image. Follow me. MT Lady led the class to a field where an interview stage had been set up along with cameras and a TV displaying the stage. You all will come up and get interviewed by me, and we will critique your performance. Midoriya, you have been in the media for a while, so you will go first to set an example of how a standard interview usually goes. Midoriya walks up to the stage with a soft smile. So who are you? Cutie. The class was a bit surprised. Was this what MT Lady thought of a standard interview? Midoriya decided to go along with the role play, squinting his eyes slightly. The sudden change in his aura made some of the girls slightly slack-jawed. I'm the unstoppable hero, invincible, and my quirk is reactionary mutation, among others. Others? Oh, you mean your other abilities? There has been a lot of speculation on the abilities I've shown during the defeat of All for One. The truth is too long for this type of interview, so let's just say I've learned a lot about my quirk. Oh, you tease. Anything special you could show us? Midoriya thinks for a moment before his hand forms into a cube. Cutting the cube off, he knees it into the air. As it is falling, Midoriya flicks into a warp gate. Ami Strike, inspired by sleep_deprived guy / One Punch Man. Sending air blasts through it to the cube from all directions. A red-hot piece of metal falls onto his newly regenerated hand. The metal cooled, and its shape was not the jagged metal everyone expected. A statuette of MT Lady was sitting in his hand of her dive kicking a giant shark villain in the scene of her debut. Ice formed around the figurine as it cooled down further from head sink, and Midoriya handed it to MT Lady. She carefully took the figure and examined it. Thank you. Don't mention it. A rosy atmosphere had suddenly appeared around them, which was quickly broken with a cough by Midnight. MT Lady shook her hair to clear her thoughts. What are you doing? He's still in school. MT Lady fixes her hair. Thank you Midoriya for the figure. Usually people give me stuff for other reasons. Okay, who wants to go next? Midoriya went back to the class and Kaminari asked if Midoriya could make him a figurine of himself. Midoriya obliged and Kaminari took the figure excitedly. Minata of course was biting his fist with jealousy. The rest of the class goes a lot better. Each student had their flaws but weren't irredeemable, and some had their own charm, which couldn't be said for Todoroki and Bakugo, who were recommended to follow in Aizawa's footsteps to avoid the media entirely. A few days pass and UA is resuming the work studies program. Many in the class decided to go back to their previous heroes they worked with. Todoroki and Bakugo have gone together to work with Endeavor. Surprisingly enough, they must have gotten close during the remedial courses. Midoriya was debating who to go to when he had a thought. Maybe it's time I pay a certain rabbit a visit. Midoriya had just gotten off the train when Miruko landed in front of him. Someone's excited to see me. Oh shut it, you. Glad you still remember who got you where you are. A warp gate opened under the both of them, sending them to the same clearing they trained in last time. Miruko looked around confused, but recognizing the area she looked at Midoriya cheekily. So who's excited about this again? What kind of man keeps a lady waiting? You're not a man yet, Kit. Come on. They spent the next few hours fighting in the forest. Miruko wanted to fight Midoriya when he was using his quirk, so he obliged. Using some of the more unique offensive abilities, he fired at Miruko using Impure Beam from his multiple arms, fire from a combo of Mouthful and Chimera, lighting controlled by Zeus, Slice sent exploding hairs, and Iron Underground was pulled above and molded into blades which shot at her. Miruko dodged in between the trees to dodge the projectiles and lead them into the trees. When Miruko saw an opening, she tried to take advantage of it, but each time it was thwarted by a different ability. It started with Midoriya taking the hit, then a yellow barrier, an air cannon, steel skin, spikes, fire, ice, smoke, green constructs, and bony ribs. Miruko was pushed back by an attack and was barely standing, so Midoriya stopped the attacks and caught her as her legs buckled, putting her arm around his shoulder. She was still looking down as he supported her. Hey, you okay? She looked up with a tired look, with her eyes barely open. She grabbed onto Midoriya's collar and pulled him into a kiss. Midoriya became beet red and flinched slightly, but Miruko held on. He was confused. Why would she, a hero, suddenly kiss him? In fact, why hadn't preemptive warning warned him about it? He didn't have time to think as he instinctually reciprocated the kiss. The act lasted a few more seconds before the heroine pulled away, licking her lips. Midoriya was once again stunned. Thanks for the workout, hunk. Then suddenly, as if she had rebooted, her eyes widened and she tried to say something, but all that came out was a small Miruko's mind. Image. Why did I do that? He gonna think I'm weird and creepy and dash. Miruko was suddenly pulled into a hug, silencing her mind. She subconsciously breathed in his scent and rubbed her head on his chest. Mirumi, are you sure you want us to be this? There had been small instances of connection during the last internship. Quick glances between the both of them. She had thought he was the one pining for her, but she had found herself missing having him around, smiling when she saw a picture of him, and was so happy to hear that he wanted to work with her. Maybe this dating thing wouldn't be so bad. Rumi looked up to Midoriya's blushed but serious and concerned face. I do. Rumi once again pulls Izuku into a deep kiss. Unbeknownst to them, an old hiker heard the explosions from Slice and was on the mountain looking down at the devastation caused by Midoriya's quirk. Using his binoculars, he looked down to see Miruko kissing Midoriya. Seeing that they were having a private moment, he looked away and hiked his way down the mountain. No way he was going to see any of the birds now that they were chased away by the noise. Ought to be young again. Chapter 45, Work. After they had their moment, Rumi calmed herself down and the both of them went on patrol. It started off a bit awkward, but once a villain showed up, Miruko got right back into the swing of things. Someone was in a convenience store pointing at the clerk with his fingers, which had metal tubes at the tips. The clerk was going as slow as possible to buy enough time for someone to help. Invincible opened a portal next to the robber and Miruko dive-kicked through. The robber's finger fired when he was kicked, but the bullet was caught by Invincible before it could graze the clerk's cheek. The robber was on the floor on his back with his head being stepped on by Miruko. He tried to move his arms but they were tied to the ground by green constructs. Quickly the police came and arrested the villain. The rest of the day went similarly to this, but after word got out that Invincible was in town, incidents died down, annoying Miruko a bit as she still had a bit more energy to burn off. Deciding that there were too few criminals worth it to be out, the two of them agreed to go to her apartment. Getting back to Rumi's apartment, she asks Izuku to stay outside for just a second. Standing outside, he hears rustling of plastic, cardboard, and the slamming of doors. While waiting, he looked down from the walkway towards the road. Some passers-by notice the movement and look up at him. They waved, so he waved back, but as they took out their phones, he opened a warp gate in front of him and ducked down. The passers-by looked back up to see the gate disappearing and walked away in disappointment. Using spatial awareness to make sure they're gone, he was about to get up when Rumi opened the door. Was I taking too long? No, not at all. Some people spotted me while I was waiting. Thankfully they didn't get a picture. Well, come in before someone else sees you. Walking into the apartment, it was clear of the familiar boxes in the corner and everything was neat. You know, I've been here before. You don't have to do all that for me. I was supposed to clean today anyway. I didn't mean anything by it. Izuku turns off his hero costume and it unwrapped into a bracelet around his wrist. Taking his shoes off and putting them on the shoe rack, he walked to the couch and sat down. Turning on the TV, it was a news channel discussing Detonarat, a lifestyle support gear company. They have been making strides to expand into the hero support gear sector. The news anchors discussed the topic slightly before moving on to the next. Rumi handed Izuku a glass of water and sat down. She was now wearing a white shirt and some sweatpants. The both of them sat on the couch for a while, channel surfing, looking for something interesting to watch. Eventually, they got to a channel that had reruns of movies from the pre-quirk era. It was showing the end credits of a movie they missed. Pressing the menu button, it displayed the next movies coming up. It was movies from the early 2000s, over a century ago. Deciding to leave it on that channel, Izuku went over to the kitchen to fix up some dinner. Opening the fridge, it was almost completely full of carrots stacked neatly and a half-eaten carrot cake. There were a few bits and bobs from the last time he was there, so at least she didn't throw them out. In the freezer was a few cuts of prepackaged meat and fish. Taking some ingredients out, he decided to make a carrot stew with rice. Walking back into the living room, he sees a man on the TV getting gas for his car. A punkish kid walked up to him smoking a cigarette. Nice car. Thanks. Izuku sat down and Rumi caught him up on what he missed. They sat and watched the movie as the stew simmered. Izuku checked up on it a few times by sticking his head through a warp gate. Rumi seemed to really enjoy the movie, especially the action scenes as the main character went on a crusade to get justice for the last gift his wife left him. The movie ended with the man having just stapled his stab wound in the back of an animal clinic. Seeing that one of the dogs was scheduled to be euthanized, he opened the cage and took the dog with him. Let's go home. The movie ends with the man walking by the riverside with the dog on a leash. The same riverside his wife collapsed on, as Rumi noticed. The credits played as Izuku checked on the stew. Food's ready. Izuku fully warped into the kitchen and prepared both of their dinners. Rumi got some cushions and placed them near the coffee table. Putting the food down on the table, the next movie played. It opened with a small house in a field near a small river with a stone bridge. The camera zoomed into the house in front of the window as narration played. It spoke of the world and what country has the best food. France, they declared, specifically in Paris. They then described a chef and his fame. The narrator disagreed with his motto, anyone can cook, and believed that not anyone could cook and he should know, as they take cooking seriously. A rat bursts out of the window holding a book. This is me. Izuku and Rumi watched the movie while eating. It was an animated movie set in Paris where a rat meets a janitor and helps him cook by pulling on his hair. It was an amusing movie to eat during as it stirred their appetite, causing the both of them to have a few extra helpings. After the movie was done, Izuku used telekinesis to move the dirty dishes to the sink and wash them as he was still sitting on the couch. The two of them spent the rest of the night watching movies. Slowly Rumi laid onto Izuku, who put his arms around her. Eventually, the both of them fall asleep with Rumi on top hugging him like a body pillow. Chapter 46, Task. Izuku woke up to Rumi hugging him, sleeping deeply. Her ears twitched as his breathing changed. All right. We're dating now. Oh my god, what is mom going to think? He decided that future him would deal with the conversation as he softly caressed her silky white hair. Rumi hugged him tighter, rubbing her face into his chest. Looking over to the clock on the wall, it was 5 a.m., the time he usually woke up. Slowly Rumi began to stir awake, pushing herself off of him, and sat on his lap as she rubbed her eyes as she stretched. Yon, I haven't slept that good in a while. She looked down and was stunned at their position. She was straddling her boyfriend sitting on his lap. Morning, Rumi. Izuku sat up now, face to face with her, sitting on his lap with his hands around her waist as he kissed her. Pulling away, he was amused by the adorable blushing mess before him. Come on, let's get ready. We have a job to do and people to keep safe. Rumi managed to calm down and the two of them went to get ready. Izuku rapped to his dorm to give her some privacy and they agreed to meet back up at 9 a.m. Warping back, Izuku cleaned himself up and went for a run. Getting back to his dorm, he got a call from the HPSC president. Morning, Prez. Morning to you as well, Midoriya. We have a task for you. You will be meeting the president and CEO of Detonator at Rikiya Yatsubashi. So what did he do to get on your radar? Our agents have noticed a slight uptick in villain support gear. We have tried to retrieve them, but they explode when the villain is knocked unconscious. Recently your classmates Todoroki and Bakugo had encountered a villain using these devices. Fact. Alright then, I'll do it. When is the meeting? Our liaison has set the time to this afternoon at 2 p.m. and he is meeting you at their HQ in Daika City on their recommendation that you and he are like-minded. Fact. Which tells me you know what their alter ego is. Yes, we suspect him to be a part of the Meta Liberation Army under the ideology that all quirks should be freely used even in public. I hope you understand how disastrous that would be. Fact. Oh, course I do. Even if quirks are a part of you, any quirk can do some amount of damage if used improperly. Good. Hopefully, you can get something concrete out of him. Goodbye. By Madame Prez. The president hung up the phone. Izuku looked at the time and it was 6:47 a.m., so he looked into the Yatsubashi family. It began with someone called the Mother of Quirks. She was the one to coin the term quirk for the powers people gained. She had a son named Chikara Yatsubashi who was a quirk activist advocating for the abolishing of quirk restrictions laws. Many quirked people at the time had seen him as the voice of the minority and followed in his campaign. Nowadays his protests are seen as acts of terrorism disguised in flowery and manipulative wording. This led to his manifesto titled Meta Liberation War, which is restricted in Japan, though a few copies seem to have cropped up here and there held by villains. This leads Izuku to Rikiya Yatsubashi, who is the current owner of Detonator, a company providing lifestyle support for the public and now branching out into the hero industry. Not much is known about him, but he seems to have a squeaky clean record for a businessman. It was 9 a.m. and Izuku warped back to Rumi's apartment. She was lounging on the couch eating a carrot. He told her he had a meeting with the CEO of Detonator. She was a bit disappointed to not be able to spend more time with him, but she understood. The two of them went out to the clearing again, but when they got there it was still a destroyed wasteland. Izuku, seeing the destruction, floated Rumi up slightly and placed his hand on the ground. A horn grew from his forehead as he activated Rewind. The forest looked like a reversing video as debris lifted from the ground and returned to its rightful place. Izuku stopped when he saw some of the leaves retracting back into branches. He let Rumi down as she was looking at the renewed forest before her. Was that a quirk? Yeah, it's called Rewind. I traded for it from the little girl Overhaul had imprisoned, and you can see how it works. Never tried it on a whole forest though. What did you give her? Dragon wings. I gave her a list of quirks that would be safe for her to use, and she chose that because if she gets into trouble she can protect herself and fly away. Smart kid. She'll be a great hero someday. That's her decision to make if she wants to be a hero. The two of them spared for a bit so as to not tire her too much before the patrol. Izuku decided to not use any quirks and spared using just his physical ability, just like how they did it during their first spar. Izuku matched Rumi blow for blow, so to a bystander it would look like Maruko was fighting a doppelganger. Slowly Izuku started to alter some of the moves to be more grounded to match how he usually fights. Rumi, noticing this, put more power into her strikes as he was now moving a lot less and not dodging. They were now unleashing a flurry of blows at each other, but Rumi was getting slower and slower, so Izuku matched her. It was around 11 a.m. when they decided to stop and go on their patrol. As it was still pretty early, the two of them decided to have brunch. Walking into a cafe, the two of them ordered their drinks and a few snacks. They sat down and waited for their order when a man in a hoodie reached his hand over the counter on the cash register while the barista had their back turned. Rumi also noticed this and gestured toward Izuku to handle it. Walking up behind the man, he puts his arm around his shoulder. The man freezes in place and slowly pulls his hand back out of the cash register. The barista turned back around to see Midoriya holding the customer that just come in. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" "Oh, nothing, just recognized a friend is all." "Isn't that right?" "Why, yeah, he just caught me by surprise is all." "Oh, all right then." "Ah, your order is ready for you, sir." "Thanks." Midoriya levitated their order to his table, not so gently, pulling the thief with him. Sitting down, he sits the thief on a chair next to them and tied him to the chair using energy construct. The thief recognized Maruko and decided to cut his losses. "Look, I'm sorry, okay, just let me return the money and you never see me again." "Fact. That's awfully nice of you, but why were you stealing in the first place?" "I just needed some extra cash, man." "Fact. For what?" "Listen, I owe a lot to people and I need to pay them back. Just let me go." "Fact. Unfortunately, loan sharks aren't exactly legal, so you're not going anywhere until we get them." "Now where exactly do we find them?" Chapter 47, Shark Bait. The man was leading Maruko and Invincible to where he usually meets his lender. His name was Tamagiri and he needed the money to pay off his inherited debt from his uncle and bills so he could continue working to pay it off, but they changed the deal so he had no other choice. He got the money from Agatsuji Finance with an interest of 30%. Maruko and Invincible were waiting on a rooftop for their shark to swim by. It turns out that was quite literal, as a large man with a shark head walked right up to Tamagiri. "Hey kid, you got the money?" "Why, yes." The man got out the small amount of cash he had gotten before trying to rob the cafe. The shark took a look at the money, swiped it out of his hands and threw it angrily in his face. "You really think that was enough? The boss will have your head for this." "Fact. We graciously let you borrow what you needed and you repay us like this." The shark raised his arm up and was about to punch down on Tamagiri, but his arm was restrained by green bands and Maruko jumped down in between them, facing the shark. "Man. Hold on, fishy. I don't think extortion is exactly legal now, is it?" The shark struggles against the bands, trying to get free. Invincible flew down quickly but landed without a sound. "I don't think Fishy has the brain capacity to answer." "Now, where is your office?" Compelled by confession, he speaks, saying that the main office of the loan sharks was nearby, hidden as an izakaya. Invincible moved the bands until the criminal's hands were in front of him and grabbed them. "Sleep." The criminal stopped straining against the bands and went limp, breathing softly. Pulling metal from the nearby trash, he restrains the shark and secures him to the ground. Telling Tamagiri to stay put, he and Maruko went to the izakaya. Wanting to not disturb any of the civilians around, Invincible asked Maruko if he could deal with this quietly. "We could also just bust in there to take them in." "Yeah, sure, but that would cause a lot of noise and alert any villain that we are in the area." "I get not wanting to disturb the public, but isn't alerting villains the whole reason we patrol? If the villains know where we are, then they can pass the information around and the villains far from us will be emboldened to act." "Okay, fair, but how are you going to do this quietly? You don't look exactly casual. Do you have a quirk for it?" Invincible slowly morphed into Akatani, wearing a beat-up Kakurin. "Whistle so you can pretty much go anywhere." "Yeah, it's how I infiltrated the Shy Hasaikai. They were using the little girl to make quirk-destroying drugs. Those bastards." "Alright, then I'm going to stay outside to stop their reinforcements and prevent the criminals inside from escaping." "Sound like a plan, let's go." Walking to the izakaya, Akatani activated Quirksite to look for a group of people hidden without an obvious way to get to them. Sitting at the bar was a gruff-looking man and the chef preparing a meal. Akatani sat tiredly at the bar and sighed. "Hello customer, what will you be having?" "See, can I just get some water?" "Sure. Here." Akatani takes a huge gulp, surprising the chef slightly. "Ah, would you like another?" "No, see, can I sit here for a bit?" I promise to move if someone wants my seat. No problem at all, young man. Not many people come here for lunch anyway. Akatani sat for a moment with his eyes closed. The gruff man spoke. Hey kid, why are you all the way down here? Shouldn't you be in school? I needed cash. Dad's sick, so I need to come out to do odd jobs so he doesn't need to worry. Damn, look, I meet a lot of people like you around these parts. I have a friend who is willing to let you borrow some money to get you by. He doesn't set time limits even though the interest is pretty high, but I'm sure you can pay that off quickly, you just need to get back up on your feet. Fact. Where is your friend? Here, follow me. The man led him to the side of the izakaya, and behind a wood board was a door. Through it was a staircase leading down with a door at the bottom. Walking through the door was a nicely furnished lobby with a door across from the entrance. There were some people on the side playing with cards while a TV overhead was showing the news. Hey boss, we have a guest. The door opened to a young Yakuza-looking man wearing a clean suit. He peeked out with a bright and yet cunning smile. Welcome to Agatsuji Finance. How may I be of service to you, Mr. Mikumo, Akatani Mikumo, sir. I heard you're a lender. Then you've heard correctly. I assume Daru told you about what we could do for you. Come in, there is much to discuss. Walking into the office, the door slammed shut behind him, leaving him alone with the boss. Ah, where are my manners? My name is Kamaru Agatsuji. I'm the boss of this place. Now, how much do you need? Fact. 400,000 yen. Do you have that? That we do. Now you'll need to sign the contract before you can get your money. A contract appeared from a plume of flame from the Agatsuji's hand. He placed it in front of Akatani with a slight tinge of excitement. Checking in with quirk progenitor, the boss's quirk was called Deal. It allowed him to summon contracts at the cost of his lifespan, but whoever signs his contract will be siphoned gradually. If the contract is broken by the signer, they will lose 50% of their remaining lifespan, giving it to Agatsuji, while if Agatsuji broke it, then he will lose the same amount and age rapidly. The more lifespan he has, the stronger and younger he becomes. This guy has been pretty low-key to not get the attention of the HPSC. Looking through the contract, it had the amount he wanted to borrow at an interest of 20%. He was to pay it back whether or not he was unable to. Making a worried face, he picks up the pen and hovers over the dotted line. He feigns struggle before placing the pen down on the table. The boss's eye twitched at the sound of the pen being placed aside. I shouldn't be here. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Akatani gets up to leave, but his way is blocked by Daru and a few other men behind him. Now Mr. Mikumo, Daru I'm sure had spent a bit of time to convince you to come down here. We wouldn't want to waste his time now, would we? Akatani looked at the criminals and slowly his posture changed. Where before he was meek and hunched over in fear, he now stood up straight, relaxed, and the fear in his eyes was now replaced with boredom. Metal items in the room floated slightly and shot at the goons blocking the door, pushing the goons out and leaving the boss alone in his office. The boss pulled out some brass knuckles and tried to punch Akatani. Akatani was about to grab the fist, but its trajectory changed and now aiming for his liver. Surprised by this, Akatani allowed the punch to connect. The strike caused a shockwave that splinters the wooden coffee table in the room. Akatani feigned pain, moving his body with the blow, and was holding his side. Not so tough now, are ya? The boss throws a hook at Akatani's head, but before he can make contact, a hand blocks it, crushing the brass knuckles between the boss's fish and Akatani's hand. The boss backed off and looked at the remains of his weapon. Not bad. You pack quite a punch and made me go a bit faster. The boss took off the other brass knuckle and rushed Akatani with a flurry of blows comparable to All Might's speed and power after the injury, but with each blow getting stronger. The boss looked like he was getting older. Deciding to end this before he punched himself into an early grave, Akatani grabbed both of his hands and headbutted him, causing him to take a few steps back with a trickle of blood coming out of his nose. Akatani appeared right in front of him and grabbed his arm. Stop. The boss's body relaxed and he regained some of his youth. He now looked like he was in his late 30s. Sitting him down on the tattered couch, metal from the walls burst out and restrained him. Letting go of him, he tried to break out of the metal, but he was unsuccessful. Fuck you, brat. When I get out of this, you'll wish you had me kill you. Threatening a hero. You're going away for a long time, plus the extortion racket you run. What? You ain't no hero. Just an overconfident brat. Akatani's form shifted, returning to invincible in his hero costume, terrifying the now older-looking boss. And why are you here? I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but sure. I'm here because one of your debtors got desperate. That is all I'm going to say. I'm curious, with that much power, why haven't you taken advantage of the power gap left by the defeat of All for One? What kind of idiot would go for the grab now? All Might is still actively hunting down the remnants of those affiliated with that monster. Everyone is waiting for him to completely retire to make their move. The long game. Smart, but you mentioned everyone. Who else is with your little clique? The boss began spouting out names uncontrollably under the influence of confession, with Invincible recording it to his phone. After a few minutes, he stopped and breathed heavily from the exertion hanging his head. Invincible grabbed his hand once again. It was nice speaking to you, Mr. Agatsuji. I'm sure your friends will be delighted to meet me. Sleep. Deal taken. Potency increased, cell longevity. The boss doesn't get any older as his quirk is taken. Using telekinesis, Invincible picks up the boss and warps to the outside. Walking through, he sees Miruko on top of a pile of unconscious bodies while looking through her phone. About time you showed up. What took you so long? The boss was quite interesting, so we spoke for a bit. Anyone run out while you were waiting? A few did, but it seems this is everyone. Invincible threw the unconscious bodies into the pile while Miruko informed the police of the pickup. Looking down at his phone, he sees that it is 1:34 p.m. and turns to Miruko. Miruko, I got to go the meeting. All right, good luck. Chapter 48, Detnerat. A green warp gate opened into Madam President's office, where she just so happens to be speaking with Hawks. Sorry for the intrusion. Don't worry about it, Midoriya. What brings you to my office? Just wanted to know if you had arranged someone to take me to Detnerat headquarters. We did not. Do you need someone to escort you? No, just wanted to know so I don't waste your resources. Have a good day, Madam, Hawks. The two of them watch as Midoriya leaves just as quickly as he appears. Prez, he's working for you. He is contracted, but the terms were slightly in his favor. Oh. Nizu really screwed you over. The president looked at Hawks sternly. Sorry, ma'am. Appearing at the location where Detnerat was, Midoriya sees a large office building with a few office workers walking by. The bystanders were a bit surprised to see Invincible warp next to an office building. An assistant walks out to greet him. Mr. Invincible, welcome to Detnerat. Mr. Yatsubashi is waiting for you in his office. Please follow me. The two of them walked into an elevator. She scanned a card and they were brought to the second to top floor. The elevator opened to a large office furnished with classy wooden tables and leather chairs overlooking Daika City. Yatsubashi was standing by the window looking out. He turned to face his guest. Invincible, so great to have you here. Invincible walks up to him and shakes his hand. He shakes the hand gently yet sternly. Heart attack resistance adapted. Pleasure is all mine, Yatsubashi. I've heard a lot of your plans. Yatsubashi's eyes tightened slightly. I've always planned to expand my business into the hero sector. Now with All Might's retirement coming close, heroes everywhere will need our support. That they do. Yatsubashi looks over at the assistant. Excuse us. Me and Invincible have much to speak of. In fact, have the rest of the day off. Oh, thank you, sir. The assistant got back in the elevator and left. Yatsubashi bowed slightly and gestured to the leather couches. Please sit. Can't have a guest standing around when there are perfectly fine places to sit. Invincible takes a seat on the leather couch with Yatsubashi sitting across from him. Yatsubashi speaks first. Again, I am happy you decided to visit, but I'm wondering what influenced the decision. My associate has told me a lot about you and there is something I want to know for myself. Well, ask away. I'm more than happy to answer any doubts you have. I was wondering if you are familiar with your ancestor Chikara Yatsubashi. Yes, I am aware of him and his activism. What do you think of his message? At his point in history, he has a lot of good points. Quirks were still feared by the public and the laws restricting them had yet to be changed since the dawn of quirks. He wanted the normalization of the quirked people, which is a noble goal. I believe that as well. Many people have unfortunately been harmed by not being able to use their full strength to defend themselves. He sheds a tear as he speaks. As it is now, all civilians need to wait for a hero to step in. They have become complacent. I'm sure you've noticed. Whenever there is a big villain fight, they will gather around to spectate and gawk at the spectacle, unknowingly endangering themselves. Well, I don't exactly blame them. They have full and absolute trust in heroes to keep them safe, but you may know of how I handle villains quietly and out of sight. No need for civilians to get in harm's way. I thought you just didn't like crowds after what happened in Osaka near Nightai's agency. I wish more heroes did it your way other than the undergrounds. Anytime a villain attacks, it affects businesses all over the city. Speaking business, how did you become CEO of this place? From what I have read about you, this is your first major public appearance. I was working here for a few years. The previous boss had taken a liking to me and made me his protege. After learning from him for a few years, he handed the keys to his kingdom to me. I don't know what about me drew his attention, but I'm grateful he gave me a chance. Oh, is that so? I guess he may just have an eye for people. If I may be so bold, can I ask if you've made any breakthroughs with your hero tech? There isn't I can reveal as of now, but there are a few items that will be coming out soon for our debut. The two of them spoke for the next hour or so about both of their lives. Near the end of it, Yatsubashi got up to his bookshelf and pulled out a book titled Meta Liberation War. I'm sure you've heard of this book. Taking the book from him, Invincible causally flips through it as he answers. Yes, I have. I was looking for a copy to better understand Destro and his ideals. Surprisingly enough, the internet has no record of his manifesto, merely mentioning its name and overall thesis. If you like, I'll let you have this copy. You can return it if you want, but I'm sure you'd be quite enraptured by its message, my friend. The phone on his desk started ringing and a voice spoke. Sir, you have your 4 o'clock coming up. Right, I almost forgot. Thank you for reminding me. I'll be right down. The phone beeped, ending the call. I apologize. Time flies fast when in good company. No problem, Yatsubashi. I'm sure we will meet each other soon. A green warp gate appears behind Invincible and he warps away, leaving Yatsubashi alone in his office. He let out the breath he had been holding the whole time, showing him the book as a tinge of black appeared on his face. He holds his nervously shaking hands in prayer. I thank whatever God for making him have similar ideals. I must inform the others. He took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat on his forehead and went to his meeting with his employees. Chapter 49, Preparation. Warping back inside Miruko's apartment, it was empty, so he activated quirk sight and looked around. Finding her in the city chasing down something fast, he warped above to get a good look at the situation. Miruko was chasing down a car speeding down the road. The car was taking sharp turns to try and avoid Miruko, who was jumping across buildings to catch them. Miruko looked like she was getting frustrated, as every time she got close they would swerve away. Invincible decides to stay out of it, pulling civilians into safety using energy construct. Eventually, the speeders hit a corner too hard and flipped the car, now hurtling into a storefront. Civilians screamed and closed their eyes, awaiting the inevitable. Not hearing the resulting crash, they opened their eyes to see the car floating mid-air upside down, with the speeders lying awkwardly on the roof of the car. The car slowly rotated and was gently placed on the ground. The speeders slowly got out of the car and fell to their knees, breathing heavily. Miruko landed near them and picked them up by their collar. Invincible then floated down. Looks like you were busy. I had it handled. How'd the meeting go? It went fine. So what are you two in for? The speeder answered unconsciously. Bank robbery. He quickly tried to cover his mouth, but it was in vain. Very cliché. Let's get them to the police. Where is the bank? A few blocks back. They'll have people get the cash. Miruko then told him where the bank was, so he warped the car to their entrance. After that, they dropped off the villains at the station and Miruko had to stay and make the report. In the meantime, Invincible decided to go shopping and restock Miruko's fridge. By the time he was done, Miruko was waiting at the station. Hey, did you wait long? No, not at all. Let's go home. Opening a warp gate, they return home. After getting changed, Rumi walked out to see Izuku on the couch reading a book. Reading the title, it was the Meta Liberation War. People are usually put on a watch list by the HPSC if they are found with it. Rumi sat down on the couch next to Izuku. Where did you get that? From the CEO of Detnerat. We bonded from our time talking and he gave me this book. What kind of idiot gives a hero proof of their villainy? An idiot that has done it before. Fact. Okay, that's enough hero talk. Let's see if they have a sequel to that Hitman film. The next day Invincible appeared once again in Madam President's office through a warp gate. Morning Prez. Morning Invincible. Were you able to get anything from Yatsubashi? Oh, just a little. Invincible threw the manifesto on her desk and her computer received a recording. It seemed that was the only proof she needed as she looked quite satisfied. Good work, Invincible. We will be in contact if we require your expertise. Invincible nodded and left without a word into a warp gate. The next few weeks go by without much happening. Izuku had continued on the trail of the lone shark he had gotten from Agatsuji. He was quite a connected man, having his hand in many operations in the underworld. Izuku was currently hunting down an informant and broker by the alias of Jiren. He had spoken to Shimura to see if they had contact with him, and as it turned out pretty much everyone that joined him was scouted. This man Bibegarawa was pretty close to him. They had his phone number but said that it was more than likely deactivated after the fall of all of one and their disappearance. Invincible was currently following Jiren as he was going to meet with some clients. Jiren walked up to two men who were standing about talking. Hello gentlemen, what service do you require of me? Good to see you, Jiren. We need info on Invincible's movements. He has been quite the nuisance recently, but his exact location is difficult to pin down, as you know. This is going to cost you. One of the two men pulls out a brown envelope thick with cash. Jiren opens it and checks the amount. Thank you for your patronage. Currently, he should be dash. Right here. Invincible was now behind the two men, arms around their shoulders. Sleep. The two men fall unconscious away from each other, parting to allow Invincible to walk between them towards Jiren, who was fearfully backing away. Jiren, you are a difficult man to track down. Invincible, so good of you to show up. I'm sorry I wasn't easy to find. Speaking of that, how did you find me? I knew a guy who knew another guy that led me right to this other guy who told me about you. The men who can get you anything, for a price. Okay. Now that you have me, what do you want? This. Invincible grabbed onto Jiren's head and used domination. Jiren's tried to pull the hand off his face but it didn't budge. A blue glow appeared on his face and he tried to scream but no sound came out of his agape mouth. Invincible released his hold on him as Jiren fell to his knees. Who do you serve? You, sire, oh eternal barrel. What's with this quirk giving me new titles? Do you know anything about the support gear appearing in the black market? Unfortunately not much, but I do know the suppliers frequent Daika City. Fact. Detnerat is the distributor of exploding villain support gear. Fact. Detnerat has sole control of Daika City. Fiction. Detnerat is working alone. Fiction. Okay, now that is confirmed. Jiren, I'm going to need you to dig up information on Detnerat and their associates. As you command, sire. Invincible warped away, leaving Jiren alone in the alleyway. Appearing back onto the rooftop, looking down on Jiren, who leaves quietly. A few days passed and Jiren made contact saying that he had collected the information. Warping to his location, Jiren gave him a document with the info he had compiled. Yatsubashi is a well-connected man mingling with other leaders of Feel Good Incorporated, the Hearts and Mind Party, and Shueisha Publishing. After giving Madam President the information, she said she had much to plan and dismissed Midoriya. A week passes before HPSC makes its move. Now gathered on the outskirts of Daika City was a large group of heroes, including some in Class 1, then along with enough personnel to surround the city. Invincible was also among the heroes with a horn on his head, but his place in the plan was quite simple. Warp out all civilians within the city, pull personnel out if in danger, and capture all defeated villains. Floating above the city, it looked small, so easily leveled with merely a flick. Invincible, are you in position? Yes. Begin evac. Chapter 50, The Single-Hour War. Green warp gates appeared all over the city, pulling over 10,000 civilians away and releasing the heroes into the middle of the city. As soon as that happened, the city's emergency alarm sounded and the members of the Meta Liberation Army burst out of their homes to defeat the invading heroes. The war was fierce all over the city. Chaos ensued. Some of the heroes had gotten hurt, so Invincible warped them to the sky, healed them using rewind, and sent them back into the battlefield. After a few minutes, some of the villains saw something in the air and tried to get a good look at it, but they didn't get the chance as more combatants got in their way. Reports of an object in the sky reached the high command. A black-haired man was sitting in a room full of monitors surveying the city, and upon getting the reports tried to get a visual of the object. Getting a camera on the object, he only sees a blurry green dot, but that's all he needs to confirm who it is. Attention all soldiers, Invincible is in the air. Do not engage. Retreat. The atmosphere changed as the army turned tail and ran, causing the heroes to pursue them. Invincible in the air saw that they weren't just scattering at random trying to hide. They had planned to do this gathering in the watchtower in the middle. Informing the heroes, they surrounded the tower and awaited what they had prepared. Tundra sent ice to surround the tower and prevent their escape, but as the ice was approaching, it suddenly stopped and reversed, launching itself at the heroes. Before the ice could make contact with them, they were melted away by Endeavor and his agency. Tundra looked shocked that his attack was repelled and used against him. A voice came into his earpiece. As I said during the sports festival, you must face the consequences. Tundra was downtrodden by this, flashing back to that fight and his pledge. While that was happening, nearby a man in a large blue winter coat came floating out of the tower as water tanks around the city burst, releasing shards of ice at the heroes. A lot of the personnel were stabbed and wrapped in a prepared medical tent. A shroud of ice flew at Tundra. He could have made an ice wall to block the shards, but he didn't want to give the enemy more ammunition. He couldn't just dodge, as heroes that couldn't protect themselves from the attack were behind him. He needed to protect them. Consequences. Tundra's left side burst into flame, turning the ice shards coming at him directly into steam. The others looked surprised by the development. They had thought that Tundra could only produce ice. He really was the son of Endeavor. Not wasting any more time, Tundra rushed the villain and sent a jet of flame at him. The villain dodged, but his ice platform melted and was considerably smaller. This allowed the other heroes to take advantage of the opening and knock him out. The villain was warped away and appeared in front of Invincible. An awakened ice control quirk. I wonder what will happen. Ice Ply taken. Quirk synergy, Ice Ply, Ice Giant, Ice King. Ice Ply given. Sleep. Warping him to the containment area, Invincible continued to observe the operation. Now that they were inside, Invincible used weaknesses detection and quirk sight to see the positions of the heroes and villains. The fighting was fierce as both sides were taking damage, but the villains were slowly but surely pushed back. Eventually, the heroes get to the top floor where Rikiya Yatsubashi, otherwise known as Redestro, is by the glass window looking out at a smoldering city. He looks up to see Invincible floating above it all like a deity. A role he wanted since taking over the mantle of his late ancestor. The skin around his eyes darkens as he turns to face the heroes. It is great to see you all here. Can it with the theatrics, villain? Your reign ends here. Oh, I wouldn't be too sure about that. He pressed a device on the cuff of his suit. Outside, the entire city was engulfed in dark sludge as hundreds and thousands of Nomu appeared in the city and began destroying the buildings. Near the outskirts of the city, a rumbling was heard as a mountainous man was charging through the forest straight at the city. Seeing the chaos, Invincible used radio waves to halt the thousands of Nomu in their tracks along with the giant men who roughly stopped before entering the city. Every Nomu stops and turns to face Invincible in the air. Bring me the doctor. One of the Nomu warps away and warps back with the doctor in tow. Invincible summoned a green construct floor to let the Nomu stand on and grabbed onto the doctor's face as he struggled to get out of their grip. Fancy meeting you here, doctor. Midoriya ho dash. A blue glow seeps from Invincible's palm as the doctor tries to scream. The glow dims, the doctor now looking at Invincible in reverence. Who do you serve? You, my master. The one beyond singularity. Did you send all of the remaining Nomu here? No, there are still many in reserve. Suddenly the top of the watchtower is blown away, revealing an enlarged and blackened Redestro swinging his arms wildly, batting away the heroes, Maruko among them. Redestro glanced back up at Invincible in the sky, making his stress skyrocket and making him larger. The defeated heroes and the now loyal doctor were warped away as Invincible slowly floated down to the remaining heroes' fight with Redestro. Invincible, we could have changed this world together. Do you not believe that the people should be allowed to be free? I did agree that the law should change, but your liberation would have made it so that only the strong would deserve peace. If quirk can be liberally used, then the ones who would reign would be those who have mind alteration quirk. The ability to control the thoughts of people. With the rarity of quirk cancellers, no one could oppose them. That's not even mentioning children with no sense of control. Redestro in anger and grief ignores the other heroes and swings at Invincible, but the blow immediately stops as soon as it makes contact. Redestro continued to swing, yet the result remained the same. To the surrounding heroes who backed off, it looked like a ragdoll being puppet to strike a wall, completely ineffectively. After a few minutes, Redestro shrinks down to his normal form as his body can no longer handle the stress placed on it. He now kneels on the ground, sitting on his legs, looking at Invincible still in the air with a bored look on his face, the sun behind him slightly darkening his features yet not obscuring his piercing green eyes. Redestro looked at the sight in sadness with a hint of awe. What are you guys waiting for? He no longer has the will to fight. The heroes who were watching quickly got up and arrested the villain who didn't resist. Invincible looked out to the city, seeing the 100,000s of Nomos still looking at him and the mountainous men staring at him with tears threatening to leak out. Master. Chapter 51, Gigantomachia. Invincible flies toward the gigantic men. If you're talking about All for One, then he's in prison. The man was a little shocked hearing that his master was captured, but soon grew angry and started to groan and grow. The large radio around his neck turned on and the voice of All for One came out. Gigantomachia, calm down. The man immediately follows the order and shrinks back to his normal height. The doctor's voice then came out of the radio. Gigantomachia, your previous master All for One was defeated by the boy in front of you. Their fight was broadcast and recorded for all to see. He defeated him with a single blow. But how is he worthy of replacing master? That's for you to decide. Gigantomachia looked at Invincible floating before him and pulled his arm back, reading a strike. He pulled upon all the strength he had and his devotion to his master and punched. Invincible raised his arm to receive the giant fist. The blow landed, and to the surprise of the heroes it landed with a quiet thud as if Invincible had just gently petted the giant man. Gigantomachia kneels down on one knee with this fist pressed on the floor. Master. Forgive Gigantomachia for striking you. You are forgiven. After all, how else would you know if I was worthy? Thank you, Master. What is your name? My name is Izuku Midoriya and my hero name is Invincible. Could you shrink down? The other heroes here are getting a bit uncomfortable with your size. Of course. Gigantomachia shrinks down to a size of around 10 meters. He was still a large person, but not so much we couldn't build a home for him. The heroes nearby looked at Gigantomachia with as suspicious gazes as he did the same, staying vigilant of the eyes on him. Invincible decides to use his own gigantification quirk to match his size so he wouldn't feel singled out. Gigantomachia felt touched by the gesture. All for One never did that. Invincible, is he friendly? He is. By the way, what were you to All for One when you served him? I was his bodyguard and now I am yours. A monster like him needed a bodyguard. It was my pledge when he saved me. I don't need a bodyguard dash. Then what will Master have me do? I'll think of something. Invincible and Gigantomachia warped to the gathering area, which was on a cliff overlooking the city, followed by the remaining heroes. Once everyone was confirmed to be gathered and the city was empty, Invincible warped back to the city as a horn grew on his head. Placing his hand onto the ground, a golden pulse was sent into the rubble of the destroyed city. The people on the cliff watched as the city rewound, each of their attacks taking place in reverse. After a few minutes, the city was restored to before the war took place. The spectators on the cliff watched in awe of the marvel. A few even took video of the event. Gigantomachia, looking at the restored city, felt a tear drip onto his cheek. Master is so strong. The next few days were a media storm as footage from the war had been leaked to the public. Skeptic, one of the commanders of the Meta Liberation Army, had recorded the war and scheduled it to be released a few hours later. The public saw the war from front to back from multiple perspectives. People had taken the footage and edited it down to better understand the whole scope of the war. Seeing an entire city secretly controlled by an extremist group frightened the public. Are their own cities controlled by these people? Some heroes were also a part of that group acting in public, deepening this fear. The affiliated groups were disbanded and investigated for any supporters. There was public outcry as they could no longer trust that a hero saving the day wasn't connected to villains. In response, the HPSC conducted full audits on all heroes starting from the top 10 down. The public was calmed slightly but now less trusting of heroes, though there was a new sentiment rising. Why had the HPSC relegated Invincible to a purely supporting role and not have him a part of the main assault team from the beginning? They had seen him defeat the leader of the extremists and take control of the horde of Nomu that appeared along with the giant. The HPSC responded by saying that Invincible was best suited for that role as he could pull allies out of danger, heal them and keep them in the fight, which was evidenced by all parties involved being in good health after the assault. They would go on to state that Invincible was authorized to step in if the assault team faced a threat too big for them to handle. The city, which had once held over 100,000 people, was now populated by a little more than 10,000 residents who were evacuated at the start of the war. The city, pretty much unharmed, was an attractive sight to many. This caused a large influx of people wanting to move in and buy the property once owned by the extremists. The government had to step in to sort out the ownership of the buildings and install a governing body to manage the city. Izuku was now standing on a walkway in a warehouse looking over the Nomu, which were now under his control. He had ordered the doctor to reverse the experiments done to them, but he informed him that he had yet to find a way to do so, not that he was even trying to previously. Hearing this, Izuku conferred with Nizu to figure out what to do with the thousands of creatures. He had suggested that they gather scientists to try and reverse the effect, so Nizu began calling people. Soon enough, many doctors, scientists, and researchers had arrived. Many had wanted to help reverse the process and some wanted knowledge of how the process was done. The HPSC even sent some of their own people, which were quickly rejected. It would take some time until they would get anything, so they had to make a place to store the Nomu. Gigantomachia was a different issue as he found it difficult to fit in any of the buildings, preferring to stay outside. Nizu offered to build him a home, but he denied, saying he could just live in the mountains nearby. Izuku objected and said if he was going to live in the mountains he should at least have a home. Gigantomachia was confused by this as he had been living in the mountains for many years underground, buried in the dirt. Izuku was not having any of that and decided to build a cabin for him, which was met with objection from Gigantomachia, who insisted that he didn't need to do that. Nizu gave permission to use the trees in the forest as it was still considered UA land. Izuku grew to Gigantomachia size and got to work pulling suitable trees from the ground and shaping them using energy construct tools. By the time he was done, Gigantomachia looked at the home with tears pouring out of his eyes. He gently examined his new home his master built, careful not to damage anything. Overwhelmed with emotion, Gigantomachia turned around and hugged Izuku. "Thank you, master." Izuku calmly pats his back slightly awkwardly as the giant man sobbed in gratitude against his chest. After a few minutes, he calmed down and apologized for dirtying Izuku's clothes, but he told him it was okay. As Izuku was about to leave, Gigantomachia tapped his shoulder. "What does Gigantomachia do now that master doesn't need my protection?" "You protect the school. You will be the sacred guardian hidden in the mountains. I won't disappoint you." Gigantomachia seemed to like his next goal as he grew slightly. Izuku bade him farewell and returned to the dorms. Getting back to the dorms, he sees everyone in the living room as the TV is on the news talking about the war. After analyzing the actions of the HPSC and himself, the news pivoted to the other heroes involved in the war. They were discussing the new developments of Tundra, who used fire similar to his father. Some said that he was hiding the ability as a trump card, while others speculated that Invincible had given him a fire quirk to give him an advantage and remove his weakness from being frostbitten. The thought of giving away some of his quirks intrigued Izuku. Momo noticed him walking in from the front door. "Hey Midoriya, welcome back. Where were you?" Her question made some of them look back to hear his answer. "I was getting Gigantomachia, the giant guy, settled in up in the mountains. He'll be keeping watch in case anyone tries to get in who has ill intent. As if we need some lackey from all for none to protect us. Still doesn't hurt to have an extra set of eyes, Bakugu. So he's on our side." "Effectively yes, though he only answers to me, Nizu, or the doctor." Actually, what did he do for All for One and how come we've never heard of him? He was his bodyguard during his prime. A guy like All for One needed a bodyguard. He wasn't always strong and with his dislike of complicated quirks he would need someone to watch his back. He wasn't always the king of the underworld. So he's just going to stay in the forest? For the foreseeable future, yes. Though you might be seeing him soon. This sent a shudder through a few of their spines. What does Midoriya have in store? Underscore 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 chapter 52, Boss Rush. With current threats taken care of, Class 1 got back to UA to continue their education. The last few months have been a hectic and action-packed time, but now they could slow down. At least that's what they wanted, but as they had faced many villains and situations, especially Midoriya, Nizu had deemed that they had enough experience to skip the first year's physical education and move on directly to second-year material. Though theoretically, they had much to learn, their skills and fighting ability were leagues above the other first years. The class was now in the mock city with Aizawa explaining today's exercise. Today's training is a battle simulation where you will be facing villain clones made by Midoriya who will be hidden somewhere in the city. Your job is to find him, capture him and get him out before the city is reduced to rubble. He himself will not fight back, but his clone minions will stop at nothing to protect their creator. Any questions? What sort of villains will we be facing? Midoriya is limited to villains that you all could realistically defeat as a class, so no All for One, Redestro, Overhaul, Wolfram, or 9, but other villains are free game. Can he make multiples of the same villain? No, each clone will be unique. How much prep time do we get? You will be given 15 minutes before the simulation begins and a map to figure out where he is. Plans were already brewing in the heads of the class. Aizawa, seeing this, allowed them to scheme and left the room as a timer started counting down unbeknownst to the class. After 3 minutes, someone finally noticed the timer and alerted the class. Momo took charge of planning routes they should take to best search the city. Jairu and Koda were critical as they could better scout out the city. With plans prepped and no one potentially going rogue again, they entered the city with 5 seconds on the timer. The time was up and all around the city warp gates opened and spewed out dozens of villains and a few Nomu. The strike team consisting of Bakugo, Todoroki, Ida, and Kirishima protected the group as they searched the area. Some of the villains were quickly taken care of, but the Nomu was another issue as they were a lot more durable. Each time one was taken down, another would appear. The class knew there was a finite amount of them, but they could easily tire themselves out before getting anywhere near Midoriya. Area searched. We need to get moving. The class picked up the pace to get to their planned checkpoints. They had gone through around 5 areas fighting through hordes of villains before getting a hit underground. Finding the building, it was a small external storage room in the back of a school. Opening the door, it led to an empty room with an open staircase leading down with lights on the side illuminating it. Walking down the stairs, they see a group of villains guarding a door. Some in the class recognized them as the villains that took over I-Island's security system. Knowing what they could do with their quirks, Todoroki and Bakugo rushed in to take them out. Within a few minutes, Bakugo was able to pull the same trick on the ferret-like villain as he did before, making him grab Bakugo's sweat. Bakugo rushed him, but this time Todoroki sent flames which ignited the substance. The resulting explosion caused the villains to turn into a viscous liquid, splattering and evaporating on the walls. Walking to the door, they opened it to see another staircase leading down. The hell? Is this a dungeon? How many floors does this go down? Jairu stabs her jacks into the floor. There are 3 more floors down. Midoriya is at the bottom. There are a bunch of villains on the way. Alright, let's go, in guns blazing. Walking down the staircase, they come upon the Vanguard Action Squad along with Tamura Shigaraki from the summer camp. Bakugo blasts himself forward to punch Muscular, but his punch is ineffective as muscle strands cover his arm. Oh, you're the one the doctor wanted. I'm going to have fun tearing you to pieces. Muscular rushed Bakugo but was stopped by Todoroki, who blocked his path, but that didn't last long as Dabi sent flames in his direction, melting the ice. I think you've forgotten the rest of us. The squad rushed forward to the class, who braced for impact. Purple gas filled the room as Momo quickly created gas masks for everyone. Kirishima held his breath as he felt a pulling force sending him flying. He hardened to protect against the impact, but he saw that he was flying toward Momo. Quickly deactivating his quirk on his body, he tried to grab onto anything, but the room was empty. Crashing into her, she took a hitched breath as the two fell to the floor. From the smoke, blades came flying out and stabbed into the concrete on the ground near them. Flesh, flesh, fresh flesh. Tokoyami, hearing this, remembered when Dark Shadow went berserk and rampaged through the forest. He looked up to the ceiling and saw the fluorescent lights. He looked toward Kaminari nearby. Kaminari, take out the lights. Nodding, Dark Shadow picked him up and he pulled the lights out and plunged in his finger. Overcharge. The lights in the room suddenly got a lot brighter and popped, plunging the room into darkness. Dabi used blue flame to light up the room to see a giant dark maw bearing down on him. Shit. Dark Shadow bit down on the clone and began to swing wildly into the villains, destroying many of them, leaving Muscular alone, who reveled in the fight and rushed at the monster. Dark Shadow was knocked back by Muscular, which only made it angrier, causing it to grab onto him and rip him to shreds. Turning back to the class, his anger still evident, Bakugo and Todoroki used their quirks to weaken it. After a few minutes, it calmed down as Momo kept a flashlight on it. Searching around the room, they found yet another staircase down. The class at this point was exhausted by the poison and the fighting called for rest. Momo tried to get them to keep going. I'm sorry, but if we give up, then the city will be destroyed by the remaining villains above. We need to keep moving. But what's the point? We've already fought 2 villain groups and we're already tired. Who knows what waits for us further down? Besides, this is just training anyway. We can try again another time. Mineta's words ran through the class, but Bakugo wasn't having it. Bullshit. We're heroes, we need to keep fighting. We've already come this far. Bakugo, followed by Todoroki, Ida, Kirishima, Momo, Sato, Tsuyu, Jairu, Mina, and Shoji walked down the stairs as the rest of the class went back to the surface. Getting to the bottom, they see a group of people with plague masks on. As soon as one of the villains saw him, they merged into the ground as the rest got into position. Rappa was the first to speak. Heroes? It's been a while since I've had a good fight. Rappa rushed at the class and Kirishima stood in his way with his arms crossed to block the hit. The punch made contact and Kirishima was knocked back a few steps with cracked arms. Bakugo came blasting, but a yellow barrier negated his explosions. Sato and Ida joined the fight, trying to fight Rappa, but each time they went for an opening they were blocked by the barrier. With the multiple uses of the barrier quirk, Bakugo noticed that it always propagated from the same person. AP shot. The villain used his quirk to block the blow, but the shot busted through, turning him into sludge. With the villain gone, the others began to move. The class began to feel unbalanced, causing them to stumble. A villain with clock hands for hair got closer as his hair extended to stab at the class, and a man who had crystals growing out of their body was rushing Kirishima. Jairu stabbed her jacks into the ground and sent a sound wave, tripping some of the villains. One of the villains got behind Jairu and grabbed her to pull her up. She tried to resist, but she suddenly lost her strength. Shoji. He turned around and immediately ran at the villain holding Jairu until the villain put a knife to her throat. Not so fast, hero. Tell your friends to stop and I'll let her go. We'll stop if you let her go first. Yeah, right. The villain put the knife closer, slightly cutting her neck. Your MOV, arg. The villain looked down to see a jack stabbed into his back. Jairu sent a pulse through it, causing the villain to bubble and pop. Shoji ran to help Jairu up, who was breathing heavily on the ground. Are you okay? I'm okay. He took away all of my strength. Sorry, you had to see that. Explosion. The two looked at the wall where Rappa was embedded as he slowly melted. Finally. Let's get the rest of them. The rest of the villains go down relatively easily compared to Rappa, but as they try to pursue them, the walls change and separate the entire class. God damn it. Bakugo raised his hand and launched an explosion at the wall, punching a hole into it. He began to run through the maze, destroying any dead ends he faced. Weirdly, the room needed to be a lot larger for him to go so far. That fucker is spinning me around. In anger, he blasts the wall all around him to get his bearings. The smoke cleared and revealed the villain that disappeared earlier, turning into sludge as the wall around him returned to the room before. The rest of the class was tired of running around the maze and sat on the ground. Come on, just one more floor. I don't think it's worth it. It only got more and more difficult. We know he can't use anything too strong, but we're already at our limit. Don't talk like that. It's just one more fight. We need to keep moving. Plus ultra. Bakugo goes to the door leading to the last floor and goes down, followed by Todoroki and Kirishima. Getting to the last room, they were met with a room full of red mummies. Todoroki sent a jet of flame into the room, burning the mummies, but more came through the flames. Bakugo and Kirishima fought them off until they saw the one controlling them all. Bakugo rushed at him but was grabbed by the red bandages, turning him into a mummy. Todoroki tried to get Bakugo out, but strands of hair shot at him and exploded, launching him away. Kirishima wanted to help, but a blue fist cracked the side of his head. Kirishima stumbled but planted his feet as he retaliated by punching the large chimera in the gut. The blow landed, but it was ineffective. The men grabbed his arm and lifted him face to face. Better luck next time. Chimera threw Kirishima into the wall, causing him to pass out. He then looked towards Todoroki, who was dodging the projectiles from Slice. Getting in his path, he opens his mouth, sending a jet of flame at Todoroki, who tried to block it with ice, but that just brought him a few seconds as Chimera punched through the barrier. Todoroki tried to run, but he was stopped by Slice. Chimera ran up behind him and chopped his neck, making Todoroki pass out. Bakugo suddenly blasted out of his restraints and turned the golem maker into sludge. Looking around and finding Todoroki and Kirishima out of the fight, he blasted himself towards Slice but was intercepted by Chimera, who sent a jet of flame in his path. Out of my way, werewolf! Bakugo sent an explosion at Chimera, but it was ineffective as Chimera reached through the smoke, grabbed his head and slammed him into the ground. Stay down. Bakugo raised his arm to launch another explosion, but it was ineffective as it only singed his trench coat. Just give it up, kid. It's over. Villains win. The rage in Bakugo gives way to shock. No, not again. I can't lose again. The villain on top of him melts away as he is warped back to the outside of the mock city together with the class. Bakugo landed outside on his back, looking at the sky. Quickly getting up, he sees the rest of the class in much the same situation as him. Glancing over to the city, he sees the villains pop. A rumbling was heard as Gigantomachia burst out from under some building. Master, your subordinates are so weak. This was a training exercise and they're not my subordinates. They're my friends. The class looked shocked to see the villain rise from the middle of the city. Was that supposed to be their final challenge? The destruction in the city rewinded, reverting the city to before the training as Gigantomachia slowly walked back into the mountains. Recovery Girl was treating the class as she grumbled about making an old woman like her do it. Midoriya warped to the class and began to help with treating the class for their injuries. Midoriya walked up to each one and swapped their quirk with a super regeneration and swapped back. He didn't want to use rewind as it will revert their body to before the training, making the training ineffective for muscle memory, and he didn't want to use overhaul as healing with it causes extreme pain. Quirk synergy, half cold half hot, blue flame, heat sink, hard flame fan, Ignis, Prometheus. Quirk synergy, Prometheus, Ice King, thermal manipulation. Quirk synergy, Chimera, Frog, Gecko, Doppelganger, Beast Boy. Quirk synergy, creation, energy construct, double item generation. The class slowly got up as Aizawa addressed the class. Pull yourselves together. As Mineta said, it's just training. It's okay to give up when the odds are stacked and you feel that you have reached your limit. Training is to make you stronger, not break you down into nothing. Those of you who continued, I commend your spirit, but continuing deeper into enemy territory when you know backup is not arriving could be the difference between life and death. I'm not saying it's the wrong decision, it could be viable when the situation demands it. The class, which was dissatisfied with their performance now, was at least okay with the learning experience. Midoriya, who were those villains? They seemed pretty strong. Did you take them from the news? They are the villains I have encountered. On the surface were the weaker villains/criminals and some of the Nomo to assist in destroying the city, while the villains near my location were elites. On the first floor were Wolfram's underlings, whom some of you faced during the Island incident. The next floor had the Vanguard Action Squad minus Kurogiri, the warping villain. The third had the main attack force of Shai Hasaikai, and on the last floor was the group under 9 who was going to attack Nabo Island. Gigantomachia was supposed to stop you once you had me in custody, but unfortunately, you all didn't get that far. So you fought all of them. Really, none of them came from the news. Double doesn't work like that. I need exact measurements of the people I want to copy to make a clone of them, and they keep their personality from the original. Southwest, they were as close to the real deal as we could get. Pretty much. Jairu and Shoji can attest to their underhanded means. Jairu shivers slightly, remembering the villain that grabbed her. But I need to use domination so they wouldn't actually kill you. Why do you think Chimera didn't just destroy the floors above them, knowing the class was still inside? The class got a little scared hearing that. UA still wants you all to train to fight these villains, and I see their reason to do so. As Momo felt during the license exam, I have been preventing any incident from getting too large. You all haven't had to fight strong and united villains that are gunning for your head. Many in the class thought back to the USJ as Midoriya ordered 13 to escort them out of the area. A feeling of inadequacy was present as they remembered all that Midoriya had done for them. A fire was lit in their hearts to face whatever challenge UA has for them. Bakugo was hit hardest but had the assurance that he did his best. Aizawa spoke. All right, let's get to the observation room to assess your performance. It was recorded. All training is. How do you think we assess you? Chapter 53, Routine. It was the Friday evening when Izuku warped into Rumi's apartment. Looking around using quirk sight, she was still out chasing down some villains who had a storage quirk. She should be getting back soon, so Izuku opened the fridge to prepare dinner. Pulling out his ingredients, he was going to prepare carrot omelets, roasted carrots and potatoes, and a rare beef steak he was marinating along with some rice. After the raid on Daika City, this had been a routine the two of them came up with. Every weekend Izuku would stay over at her place and make a dinner that contained more than just carrots. The class had been a bit suspicious of his activities outside of UA, with light teasing of his possible relationship. Mina was more pushy about it but backed off after not getting a reaction out of him. Miruko had just gotten out of the police station after booking the mugger and made her way home, bounding over buildings. As she got closer to her apartment, the smell of roasting carrots caught her attention. Her eyes widened and she started jumping faster. Izu's home. Right, the weekend. Miruko arrived home and took in the smell of tonight's dinner. Walking in, she was met with Midoriya with his back turned facing the stove. He turned around to greet Miruko. Hey Rumi, welcome back. Rumi walked up to him and kissed him on the cheek, wrapped her hands around his waist and took a look at the food. I love you too. Go on and get ready, food's about done. Rumi lets go and disappears into her room with a slight pep in her step. Back in the kitchen, Izuku placed his attention back onto the cooking meal while the table was set using telekinesis. Rumi walks out of her room in a big t-shirt and some shorts to the table set with a warm and delicious dinner. She sits down at the table as Izuku does the same. The two of them clasp their hands together. Itadakimasu. So what's the situation with the guy with the storage quirk? He was robbing a jewelry store and ran out while the seller was distracted by a customer. Jewelry store? Any reason why the shop attracted you? Very funny. If anyone would be looking into jewelry, it should be you. What makes you think I haven't? This makes Rumi flushes up a bit as she takes another bite of the steak. Hey, anyway, what did you do in UA? Training mostly. A few days ago I let the class fight clones of the villains I fought. Not anyone they couldn't beat though. Did the class complete their objective? No, they didn't. Their objective was to find my location in a city that was actively destroyed by villains. Who did you send after them for that to happen? I didn't send anyone, just put people in their way. The strongest which they fought was Chimera. Who's Chimera? I don't remember you fighting anyone like him. He was one of the villains who wanted to attack Nabu Island. He was the wolfman in the trench coat. What's so special about him? His quirk Chimera mutated him into a combination of multiple animals, even fictional ones. The form you usually see him in is his base form and already pretty powerful, being able to shoot air blasts with a punch. You should bring him out to train tomorrow. It has been a while since I fought with anyone else strong other than you. You can fight against the quirk, but I wouldn't use the clone of him. Why not? While Double makes clones of people I have measured, they come out pretty fragile, as a single bone break will make them pop and disintegrate. Oh. You should let me fight some of the groups sometimes. Sure, let's do it tomorrow. The two of them continued to talk as they ate their dinner. After finishing, the two of them washed the dishes together and laid on the couch to see what was on. Flicking through the channels, they land back on the movie rerun channel. It was showing the movie coming up, which was titled Old Boy. Intrigued by the title, they waited for the film to begin. A/N, spoilers for the beginning of Old Boy. The movie opens with a dark silhouette of a man with the sun behind him holding a piece of cloth while suspenseful music is playing. What? What do you want? The camera cuts to behind the obscured man, showing that he was holding onto the tie of a man clutching a small white dog. The two of them looked like they were on top of a building. I want to tell you my story. Who are you? The camera slowly zoomed in on the man's face. My name is Dash. The scene cuts to a man sitting on a bench, clearly drunk. Oh, Daesu. What follows is a montage of said man causing trouble in the police station in his drunken state. Izuku and Rumi were quite intrigued, as this was obviously the obscured man from the beginning dangling someone by their tie. What the hell happened to him? Maybe he got involved with some bad people. Maybe. The montage ended with Daesu being picked up by what looks like his friend. The friend apologized, facing the camera, assumably the police. The camera cuts to Daesu using a payphone, speaking to his daughter, wishing her a happy birthday and that he was coming home soon. He tells his friend to get on the phone, and he picks up, telling the daughter that their dad will be coming home soon and a happy birthday. By the time the friend turned around, Daesu was gone as the camera panned up above him and the title card faded in. He got kidnapped. Maybe he just wandered off. After the title, it transitions into a small flap at the bottom of the door was opened by a foot as a tray of food was placed down in front of it. Daesu quickly pulled the tray into the room, pushed his head into the opening and began to speak desperately to the person giving him his food. He was asked how long he was supposed to be there, but the person didn't speak. Eventually, Daesu gets angry and grabs onto the leg of the guard before being kicked in the head, making him recede back into the room, and the flap is closed. The camera cuts to the inside as Daesu is kicking and screaming to be let out. A narrator began speaking, contemplating on if they had told him that he would stay for 15 years, would it have been easier or more excruciating to endure? Izuku and Rumi ruminated on that thought. On one hand, they would have some peace knowing it would end, and on the other, every day could be the day you got to leave. The montage continues, showing the conditions Daesu had to deal with and how he coped with it. Eventually, it got too much for him when he found out that his wife was murdered and that he was the main suspect. He broke a glass and slashed his wrists. His unconscious body was dragged out and he woke up back in the room with his arms bandaged and his hair cut. This told him that he was being watched and he had no easy escape. Time passes as he unenthusiastically bit down on his meal. The same meal he had had for every day he had spent there. A thought came to Daesu's head. If he is being kept alive here, there must be someone who put him here. So he began to search through his life, writing down whoever he may have wronged in the past. After a few years, he started to tattoo tally marks on his arm for every year he was in that room. A few more years pass and one day he gets an extra chopstick with his meal, so he gets to work, slowly scraping against the wall to dig his way out. A new sense of hope was imbued into him as he vowed to find whoever did this to him and find out why they did it. Daesu drew a man on the wall and started to punch the wall to train his body while he was slowly making his way out. Eventually, Daesu made a hole to the outside just large enough to fit his hand through. He felt the wind outside as a few raindrops hit his hand. He pulled his hand back and began to frantically lick the raindrops. Suddenly gas flooded the room as Daesu quickly covered the hole with his bed and laid down on it. The gas makes him fall asleep and a woman comes into the room and sits beside his bed. Ringing a bell over Daesu's head, she hypnotized him to be in a large field of grass, but as he tried to get up he felt like he was being restricted by something. Pushing a bit harder, he finds himself in a suitcase on a rooftop. He was now wearing a black suit, but his pockets had nothing. Walking around, he sees a man holding a small white dog at the edge of the roof in tears. He runs up to the man, making him turn around and slip, but he is caught by his tie. The movie continues with Daesu discovering the truth behind his imprisonment as Izuku and Rumi are at the edge of their seats wondering what Daesu did to deserve his torment. By the end of the film, Izuku and Rumi were left wondering about the final fate of Daesu and if he truly was able to forget. Deciding that was enough for today, they then switched the channel to find something a lot more lighthearted. Eventually, they settled on a channel showing how things are made. Some of the episodes were a bit weird as the narration was more comedic than usual, but they figured out that the comedic version was a different show with a slightly different title than the normal version called How It's Actually Made. They then fall into a sorting chute saying this is my hole, it's made for me. They found the joke immature yet amusing, but eventually, it ended and they were back to the show that was showing how things are made. After a few hours, Izuku and Rumi fell asleep on the couch cuddling Ash. Chapter 54, Humorize. Izuku and Rumi were back in the forest for today's morning training. Izuku was currently using Chimera, fully making him look like a large wolfbird monster. Rumi was jumping between trees to get behind Izuku to strike him, which worked a few times, so Izuku started to pick up the speed. The training continues for the next few hours with Izuku emulating the villains he faced in the past. Rumi seemed to have the most fun facing down the bullets as their skill set was made to tire heroes out, and it turned out Rumi recognized Rappa from her Fight Club days and the clone recognized her too. Izuku and Rumi were back in her apartment as she was freshening up after training. Izuku was in the living room looking at the news. It was a slow news day as there was nothing too notable going on. Rumi walks out in her hero costume. "Hey Izuku, ready for our patrol?" "Yeah." Getting up, he was about to turn off the TV when the newscaster was cut off by a broadcast by a blue man in robes, and behind him were ornate gold walls and a banner with a red and black symbol. "Denizens of the world. I am Fleck Turn and we are Humorize. A few days ago dash." The man then continued to take credit for the chemical bombing in Europe and espoused his organization's beliefs. Their organization believes in the truth of the quirk Doomsday theory and that they will rid this world of the plague of quirks. Izuku suddenly got a phone call from Madam President. "Invincible, I assume that you're watching the broadcast." "Yes, I am. We are going to need you to deal with this." "Sure, as long as I have permission to act internationally. We'll see what we can do." Invincible and his clones were now above the 25 known bases of Humorize. Scanning through the bases with quirk sight and X-ray. Invincible places his hand to his ear to press on his earpiece. Home base. All objectives are comprised. Only low-ranking members remain. Please advise. It took a few seconds before the chief responded. Operations continue with new objectives. Capture all Humorize members present in bases and collect all data present within. Roger. Commencing warp. All over the world, green warp gates opened in Humorize bases and heroes spewed forth, assaulting all bases at once. During the raids, it was confirmed that the main leaders of Humorize had gone into hiding. Without a proper target, heroes were to remain near the bases and wait for a command. Todoroki and Bakugo were on a grocery run being supervised by Invincible in the air above the Otheon Team Hotel. The two were making the run on foot because, as Bakugo said, "We can walk on our own, babysitter." In their arms were multiple paper bags of groceries, with Bakugo carrying most of them. Near their location, an explosion went off as two villains burst out of a jewelry store. One of the villains turned into a whirlwind and flew into the crowd, who were pulled away by green constructs. Todoroki and Bakugo saw this and placed their groceries down, which were warped back to base as they took off after the villains. Dynamite went after the one who shot Glitter, and Tundra the Whirlwind, who was carrying a metal briefcase filled with jewels. Invincible kept an eye on the briefcase as he helped fix the jewelry store using overhaul. Finished with the store, Invincible flew back into the air toward the briefcase. He sees using quirk sight and X-ray that it was not with the villain chased by Tundra but going down an alleyway behind him. Invincible called Tundra. "Tundra, I'm going to follow where the case is being brought to." An explosion went off on the raised highway. "I'll handle that, just warp me to the crash." "Right." Following the boy, he found that he had gotten under the highway as debris fell near him, knocking him off his feet. He picked up a briefcase and continued running. Invincible saw that he had picked up the wrong one and warped the correct briefcase back to the store. Invincible kept following the boy as he used a subway and walked out into the public square. He smirked, thinking he had lost the heroes, until Invincible landed right in front of him with a small thud. The boy stood stiff, looking at the hero in front of him. As he was about to run, his steps were stopped by Invincible saying, "You have the wrong briefcase." This makes him wide-eyed and a flood of fear fills his face. He quickly opened the briefcase on the ground to see that the hero was right. He had the wrong. "What the hell am I supposed to do?" Before he could continue his downward spiral, tire screeches could be heard as a dozen police vehicles surrounded the two of them. With the briefcase still open, anyone in the plaza could see that it was just a normal briefcase. Invincible turned to address the police as they got out of their vehicles and drew their pistols, which caused Invincible to look at them suspiciously. The boy raised his hands in fear upon seeing the guns leaving the case open on the floor. Some people in the crowd took out their phones to record the encounter. "Officers, this person took the wrong case and please put away your firearms. He's unarmed. We don't know what quirk he has to be sure of that. Give up the case." "Fact. Are you here only for the case?" The officer felt compelled to answer. "Yes." "Fiction? Question mark. Invincible was a bit confused. They wanted the case but don't know why. Maybe. Using X-ray, Invincible examined the case carefully and noticed a box not pierced by the quirk, meaning it was lined with lead. As he was doing this, the police suddenly opened fire on the two of them. Preemptive warning activated as soon as one of the officer's fingers twitched, so Invincible activated barrier to cover the two of them. The bullets ricocheted off the barrier and into warp gates to the ocean before they could hit the now screaming and panicking crowd. A few of them got to a safe distance to keep recording the incident. A police car came speeding at the barrier in an attempt to break through, but the car suddenly was stopped by metal bending, holding it in place, its tires burning on the brick floor. As the chaos was happening, Invincible picked up the case, closed it, and waited for the police to stop their assault. A green arrow shot from far away struck the barrier, trying to drill its way through. Looking around with quirk sight for arrow-related quirks, he finds about quirk a few miles away. Looking in their direction for a moment, the quirk left, jumping between buildings. He waited again for anything else to happen, yet nothing did, as the police were still trying to break through the barrier. Don't they run out of bullets? Opening a warp gate behind him, he grabs the boy cowering on the ground along with the briefcase and disappears into the gate, leaving the police with a very angry crowd. Appearing back in his room in the hotel, he places the case on his desk as the boy falls to his knees, breathing heavily on the ground. "I thought we were goners." "Don't mention it. You were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. We are in the Otheon Team Hotel, so you'll be safe." The boy calmed down and sat on the bed with Midoriya sitting on the desk chair. "I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I'm Invincible. Rhodey." "Nice to meet you, Rhodey, and I assume that little bird is your quirk. Very interesting, might I add." A pink bird with a blue cloth mask peeked its head from Rhodey's coat. "How did you know?" "Pino was my quirk. It's a quirk of mine. Your quirk is soul, which manifests as a bird that shows you true emotions." Rhodey was weirded out that the hero knew what his quirk was, but he was struck by the phrasing being of a quirk of his. That and the myriad of abilities he used. "What sort of quirk do you have that lets you make portals and barriers?" "Let's just say it's pretty unique." Midoriya turned around and picked up the case, looking around for a panel that could open. Rhodey was a bit confused as the hero didn't ask him why he was running away with a briefcase, but he didn't want to think about it. Picking up a remote, he turned on the TV. Latest this afternoon, hero Invincible, also known as Izuku Midoriya, is wanted for the murder of 12 individuals in the public square. Police have refrained from providing any information on the victims as it is an ongoing investigation. If you see the individual, please contact law enforcement to report your sighting. Rhodey looked at Invincible, who was still picking at the case. Invincible, did you hear what they said?" Invincible pulls a cartridge from the bottom of the case that was acting as false feet and pulls a metallic object from it. "I did, but it doesn't matter. What matters now is what I have here." "But they're calling you a murderer." "So? They're working for Humorize. Those charges will be dropped as soon as they get found out for trying to take the case so violently." Invincible's phone rang, so he picked it up to hear Todoroki. "Midoriya, where are you?" "I'm in my room in the hotel with the handoff." "Yes, I've heard the news. The low-ranking police are unknowingly working for Humorize as they only wanted the case or what was in it." "So what's in the briefcase?" "There was a compartment hidden in the feet of the case with a metal puzzle box thing I'm trying to get open. We'll meet up in the conference room when you and Bakugo get back." "All right, see you then." Todoroki hangs up on him as Midoriya continues to fiddle with the puzzle. He then noticed that Pino was looking intently at the puzzle with a slight hint of annoyance as he fiddled with the metal pieces. "Hey Rhodey, you want a turn with this thing?" Huh, why? Pino flew into his face. Sure. Passing Rhodey the puzzle, he immediately started to solve it like he had done it before. Opening the puzzle, there was a purple flash drive and an SD card. Thanks, Rhodey. It'll get a bit hectic, so stay here for a bit. If you need anything, just call me. Warping into the conference room, he finds the Otheon team had gathered and were waiting for him. Invincible, did you get anything out of the case? I did. Walking up to the computer, he opened the South Dakota drive, which contained hundreds of documents, and displayed it to the group using a projector. Click the most recent one. A video began to play. Hello. My name is Alan K. Along with several other scientists, I was kidnapped by Humoris. In order to enact their plans, Humoris took our families hostage and forced us to manufacture quirk factor triggering bombs against our wills. The first terrorist attack using one of these devices was merely a ploy to gather the world's top heroes in places where Humoris branches are located. The group is planning to use these horrible bombs to eradicate those pros. In an instant, the hero population will be decimated. After losing its top heroes, society would collapse. Using the vacuum of chaos afterwards, Humoris will wipe out anyone with powers and build a world where only the quirkless are allowed. That is the true goal of Fleck Turn, the leader of Humoris. A madman. I hope my voice will reach the heroes in time. Eddie Soul, another scientist. Here, lost his life helping me. He made the key I've included that will disarm the bombs at their base. Please. Save the world. The room was silent, processing what they just heard. The TV at the back of the room suddenly switched on, showing a broadcast from Fleck Turn. The time for salvation has come. Idio Tigger bombs have been set, and there is nothing that will stop the end of quirks, but as a show of good faith, we will be telling you where they are. You merely need to know where we are. You have 2 hours to struggle till your last second. Invincib dash. It's already sent. We should all have our objectives in a few minutes. The TV turns on once more, showing the chief of the World Heroes Association. Invincible, we thank you for getting the information. All heroes move out, evac the cities, and find the bombs. I have the information on where their secret base is. I'll head there myself with the disarming key. What the hell? Why are you going alone? I'll need to fly there, and we don't know where the bombs are exactly. We need everyone to find the bomb and prevent a disaster. Approved. Invincible, move out now. Yes, sir. I'm warping everyone to the middle of town. Let's get to work. Warp gates open under the heroes, sending them away, and Invincible warps above the hotel to fly towards the secret base. Flying above some forests, he spots a carved stone entrance crawling with Humoris goons, almost all of them with quirks. Stopping before getting spotted, Invincible makes a clone and gives him the deactivation key. You know what to do. The clone warps away as Invincible focuses back on the base. As he flew closer, one of the members spotted him. Hero. The alert makes everyone look at his direction. Flying at the base, the members with ranged quirks began to shoot at Invincible, but all projectiles glanced off his body like he had a force field. Landing near the entrance, those with physical quirks rushed at Invincible to try and slow him down, but after their first hit, they were knocked aside unconscious. After most of the members were down, only 2 remained, a pair of twins with the same quirk sword kill, which allowed them to turn their arms and shoulders into segmented bladed whips. The twins laughed manically as they whipped their blades at Invincible, who allowed the blades to wrap around his arms. The twins realized what was about to happen and tried to get free, but were pulled towards Invincible, who clocked the twins in their chin, knocking them to the ground. With no one still outside, Invincible stored the unconscious villains in his storage quirk, but before he could get the twins, more whip blades tried to stab into him but glanced off his costume. We're not done yet, hero. Invincible turned around to face them. Finally, someone actually tenacious. Come on. Let's see what you got. More blades burst from the twins' bodies as they rushed at Invincible, using hit-and-run tactics to try and cut him, but every time a whip made contact, sparks appeared as the blades scraped across Invincible's skin and hero costume. Invincible shot impure beams to get them to move and to test out their speed. This exchange continued until one of the twins tripped and his leg was pierced by an impure beam, causing him to fall down as the other twin tried to help. Putting their arm around their shoulder, he tried to carry him away, but the 2 were grabbed by Invincible. Sword kill taken x2. Sleep. Without the quirk, the twins returned back to their normal selves. Now that everyone was passed out, they are put away using storage so they can be arrested later. Walking into the facility, he was faced with more members who were rushing to support the front. Invincible simply walked forward, batting and storing members as they passed out. Invincible kept walking until a familiar green arrow came flying down the hallway. Invincible allowed the arrow to fly straight at him as it struck the middle of his forehead. The arrow struck true, but it didn't pierce as the arrow spun in place, trying to drill into Invincible's forehead. The person with the bow quirk retracts the arrow as Invincible continues to walk toward them. Another projectile is shot at Invincible, but it doesn't hit him as it grows and blocks the hallway. The object is a large black metal ball embedded in front of him. Invincible stabbed his hands into the sphere and split it open the way through to see the bow woman and a large man with metal ball knuckles. The villains saw the metal ball split in half and began to shoot more, but every shot that hit the hero fell to the ground immediately upon contact. As Invincible got closer, the bow woman backed off, but the large man put his hands up. "Look, man, they forced me into this. I never believe in the hogwash they spilled." Fact. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief and betrayal as Invincible walked up to the men. "The courts will decide if you were coerced into it." Sleep. The men passed out and was stored away. The woman quickly shot a volley of arrows as she tried to escape, but her path was blocked by a warp gate, sending her right back into Invincible's arms. Her eyes widened, finding herself in the hero's arms. Sleep. Storing the bow woman away, Invincible continues deeper into the facility. Arriving in a large open room, he sees more members rushing to slow him down. Making his way through the group, only two villains remain, both wearing cloaks. The cloaks burst as two monstrous beings take their place. One looked like a red oni with spiked metal clubs for arms, and the other was a white demon with red horns and fingers. The oni jumped to slam Invincible with his club. Invincible raised his arm as the club struck down, and as it made contact, the club exploded into shrapnel, launching the oni back. Leviathan shot out his fingers and horns to attack the hero, but they simply glanced off his body upon contact. The two villains continued their attacks, but they were ineffective, being simply smacked away or destroyed. Invincible grabbed the oni by its head as it lunged forward to attack and slammed it into the ground, causing a small crater to be indented on the now cracked golden floor. The oni, tenacious as it is, tried to get up, but his head was held firm on the floor. The white demon tried to get Invincible off his comrade, but was batted away with a simple swing. Iron club taken. Sleep. The monstrous features of the oni receded to reveal a normal man passed out on the ground. Storing the men, the white demon pulled itself out of the wall, slightly dazed, but immediately rushed Invincible after seeing that his comrade was missing. Its fingers grew into large red tendrils which wrapped around Invincible. The demon tried to swing its target around, but the hero didn't budge. Feeling its fingers being grabbed, they were pulled off their feet and toward the cocked fist of Invincible. The punch landed square into the demon's face, launching the demon back into the same indented wall. The demon screamed as it slammed into the wall and tried to get up again. Invincible appeared in front of it and grabbed it by the face. Helical scythe taken. Sleep. The demonic features on the men recede and reveal a large sleeping man with the same grotesque face and slightly dark skin tone. Storing the villain away, Invincible continued deeper into the base. Walking into a large hall, it had a large staircase acting as a stage with a door under it. At the top, overlooking the hall, was Fleckturn. He was wearing robes which had blue reflective discs sewn in the cloth. Near the men were holograms showing the heroes around the world working tirelessly to find and disarm the Ideo trigger bombs. There is also a larger hologram showing the remaining time before the bombs go off. 56 minutes and 21 seconds. Huh. I thought I took my sweet time getting here. Walking towards the men, Invincible stood in the obviously marked center of the room and looked up at the cult leader. Flecked. Invincible. Any more cards up your sleeves you can pull out? 'Cause I'll be honest with you, it was quite a chore fighting through your followers, though there were a few who were competent enough to keep my interest. The leader didn't say anything as lights began to flash under his eyes. Panels on the wall opened, revealing turrets that shot lasers at Invincible, obscuring his vision. The dust clears and Invincible finds himself in a glass box with vents on the floor. Why isn't preemptive warning activating? Isn't this supposed to be a trap? Meanwhile, all over the world, screens changed to show the hall that Invincible was in. Flecked addressed the world. Look upon your great savior. A child sent into the depths of a den filled with so-called villains. Now watch as your misplaced hope becomes the downfall of the world. The glass chamber is suddenly filled with green gas. The people who knew Invincible stared at the screen in shock. Nizu was frozen in fear knowing the full capabilities of adaptation, yet he was a bit confused. Would Midoriya just warp out of the room when preemptive warning activated? Unless... A thud catches his attention, making him look back at the screen. Red tendrils began to come into view, writhing against the glass with green marble eyes and sharp piercing teeth visible all around the glass enclosure, completely encompassing the space. The gas slowly completely dissipates, revealing the true mass of the being. A clicking noise emanates from the mass of flesh. It seemed to be transmitted directly into the minds of the world, as many who weren't looking at the broadcast heard the sound. Fleck laughed at the sight as the world watched, horrified at what the young hero had become. After a few moments, the noises stopped and the flesh in the trap looked like it was being drained into its center, revealing Invincible completely unharmed with his eyes closed. The hero lets out a breath of green gas which scared many, knowing it was the trigger gas. Invincible tilted his head to crack his neck, whose sound cracked the glass surrounding him. The lights under Fleck's eyes flashed as a gas mask appeared over his face. Invincible tilted his head to the other side and did the same. This time the glass shattered at the sound, allowing the trigger gas to spread along the floor. Before they could spread far, they were suddenly pulled into and absorbed into Invincible's body. That was quite an experience, but if that was all you had. What a disappointment. Invincible opened his eyes, which now had a red vertical pupil on top of his normal green eyes. You're worse than a stage 5. Your quirk has completely changed you down to the molecule. You will not leave here alive. The wall-mounted laser turrets turned to fire again, but before they could, purple beams destroyed them. Around Invincible were dozens of dark orbs orbiting around him, which shot the turrets. Fleck, seeing the destroyed walls, rushed at Invincible, trying to goad him into striking him, but Invincible didn't move until finally, getting bored, he struck. Behind Fleck, a black tornado-like structure appeared and reversed the energy back into Invincible. Impact recoil. The energy was reflected between Fleck and Invincible, but Fleck seemed to be getting more and more tired as the energy kept moving until he was knocked back. Looking down at his hands, the shade of blue it had was noticeably less vibrant, which shocked him. How? What's with the surprise? Never hit a limit before. I have tried everything to get rid of this curse. Not hard enough. Your quirk reflect runs off of your stamina, and since you've never been in a serious fight, you thought yourself untouchable. You gave up before even trying to truly find your limit. Tell me, what did you do to find your limits? Fleck was compelled to answer. I had tried to kill myself by stabbing into my eye. After the knife was launched away, I lost hope. It's unfortunate. You could have been a great protector of the people, taking the harm a villain could bring and making them taste their own medicine, but you gave into your despair and decided the world should pay for your misfortune. How could you know my suffering? I could never be in contact with those I loved. Every time someone touched me, they would be repelled. There was nothing I could do to stop my pain. That doesn't really matter now. You destroyed an entire city for your own selfish needs. Your suffering does not justify the death of thousands, and if your quirk is so painful, then I suppose you won't object to me taking it. Invincible appeared in front of Fleck and intentionally reached his hand out slowly to see how he reacted. As the hand got close, Fleck flinched and jumped backward. I thought you despised your quirk. Why run when the cure to your loneliness is right here? Fleck is compelled again. It's mine and mine alone. How would I rule the world without power? Your cult was never about stopping the end of the world, was it? It was always to feed your own ego and give you power. To take what you think you deserve, and I think it's time I end this. Invincible punched at Fleck, who tried to block the blow by crossing his arms. The same phenomena happened as the energy was reflected between them, with Fleck sliding further and further back with each reflection until he was launched back into the banner behind him, embedding him into the wall. Invincible pulled him from the wall and threw him on the floor. Fleck lay on the ground looking up at the screens showing the heroes all over the world finding and containing the trigger bombs. Along with that was the image of himself as the hall was still being broadcast. He now had a normal skin tone and he looked at his hands in shock. Quirk exhaustion is new to you, isn't it? Though I shouldn't be one saying that. Fleck turned to his side and saw Invincible squatting next to him. Fleck tries to get away, but... Stop. He stopped in his tracks and kept lying down. Invincible had a slight tinge of surprise on it, but it was quickly washed away with understanding. Sigh, quirks really do love surprises. Anyway, I think we're about done here. It's the world's turn to decide your fate. Placing his hand on Fleck's arm as Fleck tried to resist but was unable to move. Invincible takes his quirk. Reflect taken. Quirk synergy, impact recoil, kinetic stockpile, reflect, absolute counter. Sleep. Fleck falls unconscious and is stored away. Invincible stood up and looked at the camera broadcasting the hall with a smile as his red pupil dissipated. Mission accomplished. The timers above him stop at 48:21 and the broadcast cuts out. Everyone watching the broadcast cheered, knowing the bombs won't go off. Rhodey, who was still in the embassy, fell back onto the bed, letting go of the breath he was unknowingly holding. Warping to where the Otheon heroes were, many of them cheered, seeing Invincible in the sky. The members guarding the bomb seemed to have given up and were captured by the heroes. Invincible landed near the trigger bomb and Endeavor walked up to him. Good job, Invincible. Help us transport the bomb to a safe location. I don't think we need to do that. What dash? A yellow barrier enclosed both Invincible and the bomb. Endeavor looked confused but remained vigilant. Invincible placed his hand on the bomb and vents on the sides opened, releasing their contents. The green gas spiraled and was absorbed into Invincible. Endeavor backed away as the barrier dispelled. I'm going to disarm the rest of the trigger bombs. Can all of you organize a holding area for the villains I captured? Captured? I thought you warped them into the holding cell. To the side of Invincible, a blob of clear liquid appeared, and as it evaporated it revealed the unconscious leader of Humarai's Fleck turn. The heroes looked a bit weirded out, but they quickly got some cuffs and restrained the sleeping villain. I'll be back in 10 minutes. See you all then. With the bombs disarmed and the cult members in his storage captured, it was time to return to the hotel to pick up Rhodey. Walking into the room, he sees Rhodey sitting on the bed, still looking at the TV that was still reporting the arrest of the Humarai's members. The police chief was arrested for falsely accusing Invincible of the murder of 12. Rhodey. Hope I didn't take too long. Rhodey jumped slightly, not expecting Invincible back so soon. Ah. Men don't just appear like that. Sorry. I'm here to get you home. Rhodey stands quickly. I can leave. You're not going to detain me for questioning. You were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. You were completely uninvolved in the robbery this morning. Besides, nothing was actually stolen. Rhodey decided to keep his mouth shut. Midoriya, taking this as a yes, warped the both of them in the air, with Midoriya keeping him afloat by holding him with air walk. Rhodey, feeling the air in his face, screamed loudly as he held onto Invincible with all of his strength. Calm down, you can stand. What do you mean we can stand? We're in the air. Just try. Rhodey fearfully reached his foot out until his foot hit the air platform below. Slowly letting go, he finds himself floating in the air. So, where do you live? Oh, the shanty town. Opening another warp gate, the two of them appeared at the entrance of the town. I guess this is where we part ways. Rhodey turned toward Invincible and reached his hand out. Thanks for protecting me from the police. Invincible grabbed his hand and shook it. It's what a hero should do. See you later. Invincible disappears into the air, looking like he imploded into green smoke. Deciding that was the last crazy thing he was going to see today, Rhodey turned around and ran to see his sibling. Warping back into the hotel's conference room, Invincible is met with the rest of the Otheon heroes to report their actions during the operation. With everything they needed to do completed, it was time for everyone to return home. Opening warp gates all over the world, everyone returned to their respective homes. Warping back to the designated warp point near UA, Midoriya walks out to see two notably quirkless HPSC agents waiting for him. Invincible, could you follow us please? Where to? That will be disclosed when we arrive. The agents led him into an enclosed room with a single chair and shut him alone in it. The room started to move, so Midoriya used X-ray to see where he was going. The room he was in was being moved underground using a train car. Deciding to see what they had planned, Midoriya sat down on the chair they prepared, which immediately cuffed him to it. Anti-quirk cuff negated. Let's see the hand you play with, Madam President. Chapter 55, Arrogance. Finding himself a few floors underground in Tartarus, Midoriya sits patiently waiting for someone to meet him. Getting bored, he decides to hack into the prison to see what he can change in the room. A screen appears in his vision showing his cell. He looked like he was staring into thin air with his hand slightly tensed on the armrest. Poking around with hacking, he finds that he had complete control over the entire prison and its servers. Looking through the registry, he finds many villains defeated in the past and surprisingly people he had taken quirks from, like Overhaul. After copying the data to UA, Midoriya flicks through the cameras to see who will be meeting with him. He stopped on one camera showing someone he recognized. A woman with indigo hair with pink streaks in an orange prison jumpsuit lying on her bed awake and staring at the ceiling. The prisoner is Lady Nagant, once a great hero until she was imprisoned for killing the previous president of the HPSC a while back. Looking through the servers, they all attest that she had merely gone mad, but knowing the HPSC, that was definitely a fabrication. A room next to his own opens, letting someone in. That someone was Madam President. She walked to the wall in front of him and seemed to be looking straight at him. The wall drops away, revealing her behind a glass wall alone with a headset microphone on her head. Invincible, glad to have you back. Fact. Midoriya answered with a smile. Glad to be back, though the welcome has been a bit restrictive. Why the specialized transport room? You have absorbed the idio trigger from the bombs. We were taking extra precautions for the safety of the public. Fiction. Oh, how considerate, but I've been here an hour and you have done nothing but cuff me to this chair. I do wonder what kind of data you got from the sensors in here. Her face scrunched up slightly as she looked at Invincible, who was unfazed by her presence. Pressing a button on the console in front of her, 4 panels in the room opened to reveal guns sticking out of them. Getting a closer look, the guns were loaded with red darts. Nice. I assume Naite doesn't know of this. Fact. Of course he is aware. What hero would hide such a marvel from the world? Fiction. Oh, how thoughtful of him, but I think it's time you speak your mind. What do you desire from me? What the Commission requires is that you be more open to our guidance. And if I do not appreciate such guidance, what will you do to incentivize me? A panel opens on the floor and from it, a screen is raised. It turned on to show Inko at home watching the news. The camera panned to the side where a barrel of a gun was shown. Midoriya's smile slowly faded. The camera then cuts to Miruko jumping through the city on her patrol, the camera keeping her in frame. Midoriya looked away from the screen and straight at Madam President. Will you do as we ask? Midoriya continued to stare right into the eyes of Madam President, making her slightly uncomfortable, but she hid it well. No, I don't think I will. Madam President pressed on her headset. Phi dash. But all she heard was a small grunt and the gun falling onto the ground. The screen to her side showing the assassins was pointed at the floor until it was picked up and shown a green construct of Midoriya with a smile on his face. Midoriya in the cell spoke. So Prez. Any more cards to play? Her eyes widen in realization. Realization that the quirk sensors in the room didn't work, she presses the button to fire the turrets in the room. The room is filled with flashes as the guns fire the darts and switch to live ammo. The firing continued for a few seconds until they ran out of ammunition with the sound of brass casings hitting the floor. Madam President stood apprehensively as the smoke in the room settled. A fearful voice came through her headset. Madam President, please look to the screen to your right. Quickly looking over, she sees a news station with the headline "The Corruption of HPSC." The volume of the TV turned up. Was released by the principal of UA, indicating that the HPSC has been using underhanded means to control the current status quo, not limited to harassment, bribery, extortion, imprisonment, kidnapping, assassination, and murder. The documents leaked reveal that Hawks, the current number 3 hero, was bought by the Commission after his father was arrested by Endeavor. There was also proof that the ex-hero Lady Nagant killed villains and uncooperative heroes on the orders of the Commission. The people affected by the corruption are protesting in front of HPSC HQ demanding dash. Did you really think that all of that would never be revealed? Madam President turned to look at Invincible. He was sitting with his legs crossed and his head resting on his fist. His chair was replaced by a metal throne made using the guns from the wall and the darts and bullets shot at him. He was looking at her with a face that said, "Are you surprised?" She was shocked that he wasn't at least hurt. Strewn around the floor was pieces of the shattered darts and their contents. I'll take that as a yes. Your inflated sense of worth had blinded your empathy even if you spared Nagant the death penalty. The news anchor grabbed her attention. Just in, a recording of a captured Invincible underground in Tartarus has been brought to our attention. We have yet to review the footage, so viewer discretion is advised. The video showed Invincible's journey from being locked in the room and cuffed to the chair and ended with the camera cutting out when the turrets began firing. The screen changed to a live broadcast of the prison showing Invincible on his iron throne and Madam President angrily staring at him. Look alive, Prez, you're on TV. She glanced at the screen showing herself as Invincible stood up, made the throne disappear, receding into the floor, and walked toward her. She expected him to stop when he was close to the glass, but he just kept walking as his body pushed through the glass and metal like it was tissue paper. How do you still have your quirk? Really, all your dirty laundry just got aired out and you're worried about me. I'm touched, honestly. Did you not notice the broken darts on the floor, or were you too mesmerized by my presence? Even if they worked, what did you think would happen even after I safely absorbed trigger? Madam President backed away, trying to get away, but the door was locked. She tried to use her lanyard around her neck, but all she grasped was air. She felt a small breeze from the missing lanyard as she turned around. Is this what you were looking for? She looked at her lanyard hanging in Invincible's hand. Look, I apologize for our actions. We held no ill will to your family. Water under the bridge. We'll leave you and your family alone. Fiction. You're more delusional than I thought. You are no longer in charge if the public has anything to say about it. The power you hold is gone. Metal flies from behind Invincible that wraps around the woman's hands, tying them behind her back. Placing his hand on the scanner, the door opens automatically. Let's have a little tour, shall we? Chapter 56, Precedental Pardon. Invincible looked over to the camera and with a smile. Sorry about the emotional roller coaster. See you all on the outside. And cut the broadcast. The news anchors had now gathered and were discussing what was shown to them. The president of the HPSC willingly activated turrets to kill the hero who just saved the world, and that hero had just shrugged off the assassination attempt. Inko sat back down on her couch, seeing that her baby was okay, while Maruko was already on her way to HPSC HQ to kick some sense into them. Walking through the prison, the guards don't stop him as he makes his way to Lady Nagant's cell. Standing in front of the cell, he sees Lady Nagant using quirk sight. Placing his hand on the touchpad, it slides open the steel door, which startled the ex-hero. She quickly got up, put her back to the wall, and raised her right arm, trying and failing to activate rifle. Invincible raised his hands in a placating manner. Sorry for intruding, Lady Nagant. Who are you? I'm Invincible, but you can call me Midoriya. I'm here to escort you out of here. Nagant looked confused at Invincible, and the confusion only increased as she noticed the new president of the HPSC standing cuffed behind him. Wait, what do you mean escort me? I'm a killer. A killer under the control of those beyond them with no other choice. If I'm free, then why come here personally? To make sure you don't get backstabbed on the way out. A green warp gate opens in the cell, shocking both Nagant and the guards by the door eavesdropping. Madam President was quickly dropped into a portal that appeared under her and found herself in the office of one Detective Tsukachi and Mustafu. How? Let's just say my quirk is a bit unique. Come on. Walking through the gate first, Invincible poked his head back through to goad Nagant. Nagant, you might want to squint your eyes a bit. It's quite bright topside. Invincible reached his hand toward her. She hesitantly takes his hand as he gently guides her through. Explosive substance generation adapted. Accelerated hair growth adapted. Keratin hardening adapted. Peeking her head through the gate, her already squinted eyes closed tightly as the sunlight hit her face. Slowly opening her eyes, she finds herself on the surface level of Tartarus. It had been over a decade since she had felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. So what now? We get to UA. Why? Because it's the safest place for the time being, and the principal would love to speak to you again. Oh, okay. Another warp gate opens and they find themselves in Nizu's office. There was already tea prepared on the table as Nizu was laughing maniacally at the recording of Madam President losing everything. Nagant seemed used to his antics. Even if the world changes, you're still you, aren't you? Nizu calms down and turns to face Nagant. Tsutsumi, it's great to have you back. Please have some tea. She sits down at the table and takes a sip, which immediately relaxes her shoulders. Midoriya does the same. What happened while I was gone? That is a long story, but one we have all the time in the world to tell. The next hour was a full explanation of the events after her capture. Mainly All Might's rise, the first confrontation on Hashima Island, the fall of All for One, the disarming of the trigger bombs, and how Invincible had been a major part in some of the events. The explanation was accompanied by holograms made using Energy Construct to give her a better picture and for Midoriya to train the quirk. Halfway through, the constructs changed color to better illustrate the events, surprising everyone in the room. I didn't know you could do that. Me neither. The explanation continues with the scenes getting more and more complex until it looks like a full render of the events. Tsutsumi sits for a moment taking the information in. So, you're going to be the next number one? Kinda. I'd rather be the unofficial number one and let others keep the title. I don't want to crush any else's dreams, but that's enough about us. There must be a lot you need to think about. I'm gonna go tell the public I'm fine and answer a few questions. Alright then. We'll see you later, Midoriya. Warping away in a puff of green smoke, Invincible finds himself above HPSC HQ looking down on the protesters. Look, it's Invincible. Hey everyone. Invincible slowly floated down to the cheering crowd. They started to calm down and quiet as he landed on the awning. Alright, everyone should spread out starting from the back. We don't want to crush anyone, do we? As Invincible said this, his eye's pupil became vertical and gained a reddish hue. Something came upon the crowd and they followed his orders robotically. What? I didn't use ventriloquist. The crowd settled with enough room to not crush each other. Invincible. What happened? Sorry about that. The idio trigger may have had some unknown side effects. Anyway, I'm here to answer some questions while the police help clean house. Some news reporters rushed forward to ask their questions and news cameras pointed at him. Invincible points one of them out, allowing them to speak. Where is Madam President? Has she been arrested? She has been warped to Mustafa Station where she will be processed accordingly. In the leaked documents there was mention of assassinations conducted by Lady Nagants under the orders of the HPSC. What will be done with the ex-hero? I have met her and have allowed her to be released. On my way to her cell, the guards allowed me to reach her without trouble. She was coerced into doing the Commission's bidding and hates herself for what she had to do. The crowd murmured a bit, decrying them for their conduct. How were you able to use your quirks? From the broadcast we see that they had placed you in a room and placed anti-quirk cuffs on you, yet you were able to use your quirk to escape. I wasn't able to use my quirks at first, but after a while, I regained their usage. This caused them to go speechless for a second as they fully comprehended the question. Does that mean you are immune quirk-canceling properties? As of an hour ago, yes. A murmuring can be heard from the crowd as the next reporter asks a question. What will be done with the HPSC? After what you have revealed, I believe the public will not approve of their continued existence. Even if the Commission had done some atrocities, they were committed by deluded people who believe that the ends justify the means. They have indoctrinated and threatened many in the name of the greater good. Now that their misdeeds are revealed, we the public must choose who will lead the Commission and make the illusion of their false justice true. I will personally aid in the investigation. With that statement, it seemed that the reporter's curiosity had been satisfied. After all, there was still much that was to be examined in the leaked documents. As the reporters were starting to leave, a white blur sped past them and moved toward Invincible. Izu. Miruko was hugging the young hero who was on the awning with a bright smile. One that the media had yet seen. You're okay? Yeah, I am. Sorry about worrying you, Rumi. Rumi. The news cameras quickly focused on the exchange. The clamoring from the crowd brought the two of them out of their atmosphere, making the two of them beat red. Immediately the two were warped away, leaving a disgruntled and curious crowd. Meanwhile, a shrill screech was heard from UA Chapter 57. Meanwhile, back in the dorms, the class was lazing on the couch as they had a day off after the Humorize crisis. Ida is reading about engines at the dining table with an orange juice half full. On the couch was Uraraka, Aoyama, Mina, Shiro, Kaminari, and Mineta. Shiro and Kaminari were playing a fighting game on the TV while the others on the couch watched or switched in when they needed to. Everyone else was either in their room or in the gym like Bakugo, Todoroki, and Kirishima. Momo suddenly burst out of the elevator along with everyone else. Switch to the news. Quickly turning off the game, Mineta changed it to the news. It was showing Midoriya cuffed to a chair with turrets pointed at him, and in front of him was Madam President of the HPSC. Momo noticed the red vials loaded in the guns. Is that dash? Quirk nullifiers. They really went all out. Everyone turned to Bakugo to keep explaining. The commission is planning to turn his quirk off so he can't adapt to whatever the hell they throw at him next. The class's eyes widened at the revelation as their attention was drawn to the TV by the sound of gunfire. The room Midoriya was trapped in was filled with smoke completely hiding the room. The class watched on in suspense, that is until Bakugo spoke. The hell you all worried for? It'll take a lot more than that to take care of that bastard. Especially after Humorai's. The dust cleared, revealing Midoriya sitting on a metal throne made from the turrets from the wall. He was looking at the president with a bored expression. The class blew a sigh of relief seeing that he was okay. The broadcast continued with Midoriya walking through the glass wall separating him from his jailer and arresting them. Looking over to the camera, he signed off. The news anchors reappeared, now discussing the footage they were shown. Bakugo walked back into the kitchen to get himself a drink, followed by Kirishima. The rest of the class stayed on the couch with the news still on and waited for Midoriya to return from his false imprisonment. An hour passed with nothing notable happening as the news kept discussing the leaked documents. That was until an urgent announcement was made. Look, it's Invincible. Cameras pointed to the sky showing Invincible slowly floating down and landing on an awning. Invincible's eyes shifted and the protesting crowd spread out. Even the class felt some form of compulsion from his words. What the hell was that? He should explain it. The crowd looks more confused than we are. Invincible apologized for the mishap, saying it was an unknown side effect, and allowed the reporters to ask some questions. The questions were mainly to confirm what was shown on the news, the fates of the people involved and Invincible's immunity to quirk cancelling effect, which seemed to be the main question in the crowd. After a few minutes, the crowd started to disperse and the reporters began to pack up when suddenly a white blur sped past them and onto the awning. Believing that it might be an attacker, the cameras were quickly pointed in the blur's direction. Izu. Izu. This thought was shared by everyone in the class, though one was more possessive yet sad. The camera focused on the blur. It was Miruko, who was hugging Invincible tightly with a bright smile on her face. Yeah, I am. Sorry about worrying you, Rumi. If it wasn't obvious before, it was now. The two of them seemed to have realized where they were, woken up from their focus on each other by the crowd and teleported away in a wisp of green smoke. The class was very surprised by this, as before this Midoriya had not shown any interest in anything like dating. Every interaction they had with him did not indicate he would be open to a relationship with anyone. The only hint of it would be during the interview training with MT Lady. A shrill shriek interrupted their ruminating. Mineta was on the floor on his knees with red scratch marks on his face. How the hell did this happen? All the girls in class already like him and now he bagged the best one. A prehensile tongue came from behind and smacked him on the head, making him pass out face down ass up on the carpet. Hey Bakubro, did you know anything about this? How the hell would I know? I see him just as much as you all do, Metapod. Didn't know you cared about Pokemon enough to reference it. Shut it, Electabuzz. Enough of Bakugo's surprising interests. Do any of you have any inkling of Midoriya being in a relationship with Miruko? The class looked at each other with a look of, do you know anything, but after a few seconds, it was obvious that they knew nothing. Mina slammed her fists on the table. How the hell could I have missed this? I thought I had a knack for these kinds of things. Toru patted her on the back, comforting the gossip queen. Don't blame yourself, Mina. He doesn't talk about that kind of stuff around the class. We wouldn't have known. The others didn't really know what to think about this but decided to confront Midoriya when he got back. Inko was watching the protest on the news, waiting worriedly for her son to return. Seeing him appear above the building calmed her down immensely as she lay on the couch. As she was about to get up, turn off the TV and go about her day, sudden gasps caught her attention. Izu. The rabbit hero was hugging her son. The rabbit hero was hugging Izuku. She even used a nickname. Yeah, I am. Sorry about worrying you, Rumi. First names. I need to meet her. Like the wind, Inko disappeared out of her door. We have so much to talk about, Rumi. Chapter 58, Confrontation. Izuku and Rumi appear back in Rumi's apartment, landing on the couch. Sitting there with a shocked expression on their faces for a few seconds. Izuku was the first to regain his bearings and turned on the TV. UST a moment ago was invincible on the main building of the HPSC, being embraced by the number 5 heroine Miruko. The reporters and crowd on the scene stated that they referred to each other using pet names. Rumi seemed to get out of the head as she heard the broadcast. The two stared blankly at the TV as the news spread. There was a sudden knock on the door which brought them out of their reprieve. Izuku, looking with quirk sight, knew exactly who it was as the door. The lock on the door clicked as each pin was moved into place and unlocked, allowing the person in. Hi, Mom. Inko Midoriya stood at the doorway with an unsettling smile, looking at the woman her son had decided to date and spend the rest of his life with. In her opinion, she may be just using her baby boy. Inko pulled Rumi by the collar of her leotard using her quirk and took her outside. With a slam of the door, leaving Izuku alone listening to the news, which had moved on to the ethicality of the relationship due to the age gap. After a minute, Inko peeked her head back in. Izuku, could you leave for a moment? We want to speak inside. Okay. Call me if you need me back here. I will. With an uncertain look on his face, Izuku warped into his dorm room in UA, leaving Rumi to face the scrutiny of the matriarch. Landing on his couch, Izuku decides to go upstairs to see what everyone else thinks. The elevator opens to most of the class looking at him, waiting for an answer. Mina was in front with a teasing look. So Midori, is it true? Yes, I am in a relationship. A scream could be heard from the living room that was getting louder as a purple blur slammed into Midoriya. Mineta, now awake with a bump on the back of his head, was holding Midoriya by his collar with his feet on his chest to hold himself up. You handsome son of a bitch. Why do you get all the attention? Yogwek. Tsuyu's tongue rose from the back of the group, wrapped around his neck and pulled him off of Midoriya. Mineta was struggling in the air, being held up by the appendage. The next few minutes were spent explaining how it got to be that he was dating someone a decade his elder, with the main questioner being the girls. With their curiosity mostly satiated, the class returned to the couch, followed by Midoriya. Sitting down, the girls sat weirdly close to Midoriya, to the belligerent despair of Mineta. Mina sat next to Midoriya's right side, leaned toward him, supporting her upper body using her hands on the couch. Her face is now very close to Midoriya. So how far did you get with her? You've been staying at her place for a while now. It isn't my place to say. You've been in her room. No. Look, we haven't done anything worth gossiping about except getting together. Also, why are you also interested now that I'm in a relationship? Mina and the rest of the class that was paying close attention realized that they looked like creeps trying to dig for information about somebody else's life. Mina backed away with a slight purple blush as she felt how close she was to him. Momo answered him. We're just curious is all. You didn't exude availability even before you met Miruko. I can't exactly blame you all for that. I wasn't looking to get into a relationship, it just kinda happened. A ringtone cut the conversation short. Midoriya picked up the phone, said a few words and stood up. Who was that? My mom. She just got done interrogating Miruko. I gotta go. Oh. Okay, we'll see you later then. With a wave goodbye, he warped away in a puff of green smoke. Appearing back inside Rumi's apartment, standing at the doorway, he sees Inko and Rumi, who are speaking happily with each other. Inko, who was facing the door, noticed Izuku appear. Honey, welcome back. Come on, have a seat. With a small bit of apprehension, Izuku sits down on the couch next to Rumi, which brings a warmer smile on Inko's face and a small blush on Rumi's. So. Is everything okay? Oh, everything is just fine. So when will I be getting the rank of elder? Izuku and Rumi's faces became beet red as Izuku stuttered out an answer. We haven't gotten that far yet. Well then, I'll leave you to get to it then, bye. Inko walked to the door and opened it to go out, but before she closed the door behind her, she turned around. I expect good news soon. and closed the door, leaving behind her embarrassed baby boy and now daughter-in-law. A few days passed, as the HPSC was restructured. Invincible had visited the organizations and influential people affiliated with the commission, which resulted in a few arrests and several small skirmishes. Yakumura Mera was now the current head, as he was the only somewhat high-ranking person who was not involved with the shady actions of the commission. He vowed to not allow the commission to fall into the trappings of its previous leader and promised to be more transparent to the public about the commission's dealings. With his statements registering as fact under Izuku's quirk, he felt the future of the commission was left in safer hands. With the reveal that Invincible and Miruko are in fact in a relationship, the reaction from the public was mixed, to say the least. On one side were the supporters happy that a new couple was formed, and on the other were those who saw the pairing as unnatural for a number of reasons. The most vocal of these were those who disliked the power difference between the two, with one being a pro while the other was still training, and the resulting age gap. To them, it seemed like Miruko was using her authority to take advantage of a junior. Another contingent saw it as unnatural due to their differing appearances, with one being a human and another a mutant, as they called her. With the comments of their relationship ignored, life goes on. Invincible was disguised using Gecko, and Beast Boy was in the corner of a bar with Jiren getting info on the movements underground. A few of the patrons were keeping their stern eye on Izuku. Fortunately, sire, the underworld is at a standstill. Not many are willing to make large moves to fill the vacuum left by your conquests. That's good news. Keep me updated if things change. As Izuku was about to stand up when two large men got in front of him. You should already know the rules here for things like you. Clean up after yourself. Confused, Izuku glanced back to see the seat the same as it was when he sat down. One of the men raised his now rusty jagged metal hand as Izuku looked away to punch him in the face. The blow was intercepted by Izuku, who grabbed his fist and twisted, lifting the man into the air and making him do a barrel roll. Landing on the ground on his back, the man's eyes were rolling in their sockets, his hand now twisted and crushed. Everyone in the bar stood up on alert and got ready to attack. The other man, seeing his friend on the ground, retaliated. What the hell, freak? You're gonna pay for this. The bar rushed at Izuku. Jiren tried to step in and help his sire, but Izuku stopped him from engaging. Jiren respectfully stood back and allowed his sire to do the Lord's work. Chapter 59, Groups of Interest. The first man swiped at Izuku with crystal claws. Izuku dodged and let the man swipe past him as he stuck his leg out, making him trip, hitting his head on the bar and passing out. Another man got close enough to touch Izuku on the arm. How about this salamander? Placing his hand on Izuku's arm, he activates his quirk, which causes bramble to grow out of Izuku's skin, ensnaring him and holding him in place. The other men rush to attack Izuku with a variety of physical quirks, but as they get close, he breaks out of the bramble, sending jagged splinters all over the bar and hitting the assailants. Some of the thugs covered their eyes as they were hit in the eyes. Stepping over the wailing thugs, he walks toward the men who blocked, allowing most of the splinters to be embedded in his arms. Why do you hate mutants? The man is compelled to answer. Because they are against the natural order. Fiction. Jiren, are there any groups that are discriminatory to any group of people in the underworld? The three main groups who remain are the Creature Rejection Clan, the Inhuman Supremacy Group, and the Quirkless Liberation Front. There were previously four, but now they are currently in hiding after the fall of the Meta Liberation Army. Many of their members had left in fear of your judgment and mercy. Nodding at the information, Izuku and Jiren walk out of the bar, with Izuku touching the door on the way out, restoring the bar to before the fight happened. Now in Rumi's apartment, Izuku was looking for information on his laptop to get to know the three extremist groups hidden in the underworld. The Creature Rejection Clan was a group that abhorred the appearance of people with complex mutation quirks and believed those with the quirks no longer qualified as humans and would easily succumb to their quirks' feral instincts. The bar Izuku was just at was owned by one of their members to gather like-minded people. These people mainly espouse their beliefs to the people discreetly. They operate underground, kidnapping people, killing them and stealing what they own to fuel their purges. They used to have support from influential people, but they have been cut off from their funds after some of their supporters were caught during the MLA cleanup and the rest got cold feet and ran. The Inhuman Supremacy Group were another group which opposed the beliefs of the CRC. They were made up of people with extensive mutation quirks who believed that they were the next step in evolution, looking than other quirk users as they were weaker. They enforced their authority by conducting violent protests condemning the discrimination of those with complex mutations. Due to their passionate displays, most of the public have a negative opinion of them. The last was the Quirkless Liberation Front, composed of the quirkless and late bloomers who are seeking retribution for the discrimination done to them. This group mainly acts as informants, weapon smugglers, and vigilantes. The members only attack when provoked or have probable cause that an individual has discriminated against the quirkless. There were a few other groups, but information on them was scarce and they were relatively small, so Izuku elected to wait and see if they decide to make moves. Izuku's opinion of the main three were the following: quirk supremacists of another genre, and people with good intentions but bad execution. The three groups' prevalence has waned recently, but their members are still active though scattered. While debating how he was going to seek these groups out, a pair of 10 arms wrapped around his shoulders and a chin rested on his head. What you working on? Just researching certain extremist groups in the underworld. You worried about the guys at the bar? They're a dying breed. No point in wasting your energy on a group so splintered. Izuku chuckled slightly at the pun. He turned his head toward her and kissed her on her blushing cheek. Even so, they should be stopped from hurting others. Okay. In a window nearby, a pair of binoculars could be seen peeking into the hero's apartment. The woman peeking wore a violent scowl, looking at the peaceful scene through the balcony door. That damn mutant. Don't worry, Envy, you don't need to deal with those things anymore. I'll be the one to save you. Waking up the next morning, Izuku finds himself once again cuddling with Rumi, but this time in her room, with her rubbing her face in his neck to get comfortable. The room was pretty cold, so using Prometheus he heated up his body slightly, making Rumi cuddle tighter. Izuku lay there enjoying the sensation, waiting for a few minutes for Rumi to wake up. Rumi started to stir awake, so Izuku decided to speed up the process a little. Kissing her, Rumi's eyes widened but soon fell closed as she savored the kiss. Pulling away, a string of saliva was still connected to both of their lips for a few moments before breaking away. Morning, Rumi. The sight of a blushing Izuku must have gotten to her as she hid her blushing face. Izuku laughed slightly due to how adorable she was being. Come on, we need to get ready. Finally getting out of bed, the two of them get to their usual routine, with Izuku getting ready a bit early and preparing breakfast while Rumi helped after getting changed. After breakfast they had their morning spar in the forest. Today Izuku will be fighting with a base human with a slight strength enhancer, mainly using weapons made using item creation to even the playing field. Standing in the clearing across from each other, Izuku summoned a white stone bow staff and slung it on his shoulder. So what am I fighting this time? You fighting against a strength enhancer and item creation. That's it. You better start ramping up quick or it's gonna be boring. Izuku smiled at the response as Rumi engaged. Pulling the staff off his shoulders, he swings to strike at Rumi, who raises her arm to block, but Izuku stops the swing before it makes contact with her arm, though the same doesn't happen to the end of the staff, which curves around and strikes the back of her head, making her trip forward slightly, setting her up to be hit by the other end of the staff, sending her back a few steps. The hell was that? Villains don't use bow staffs. I would have thought they would be popular, though considering how they use their quirks it shouldn't be surprising. Rumi rushed in again as Izuku spoke, but before she could get close the staff extended and poked her stomach, stopping her pursuit. Rumi smiled at the development as the staff retracted. Okay, now you're getting me pumped up. Chapter 60, Infiltration. Rushing back in, Rumi was a lot more careful of the staff's positioning, getting into areas where it was less effective. She managed to get a few strikes in, launching Izuku back a few steps, so he decided to pick up the pace. Rumi's kicks were starting to strike the staff more and more as Izuku intercepted the attacks. The exchange continues for the next half hour, with Izuku switching to different weapons to spice things up. By the end of it, Rumi was sitting with her back against a tree she just hit, with a satisfied smile on her face. Walking up to her and unsummoning his warhammer, he placed his hand on her shoulder and used Overhaul to restore her strained muscles to their new prime state, using some of his own body mass subconsciously so she wouldn't feel as much pain from her muscles threading themselves together. Rumi gets up and starts to stretch out the newly formed muscle, feeling the new power she now has. She got into a stance and kicked toward Izuku's head, but Izuku didn't move. The kick stopped a few millimeters away from his left cheek, sending a powerful air blast comparable to a full-powered punch from Chimera, destroying some trees in the way. With a smile on her face, she puts her leg down. When did you learn to do that? I feel so much stronger. I've been trying to make it so Overhaul doesn't hurt when used to heal people. I take it that it didn't hurt too much, did it? Who do you think I am? That little sting won't make me flinch. After fixing up the forest from their training, Izuku warped the two of them floating above the city. Having a look around with quirk sight, would-be villains were out in public acting normally and doing their daily routine, not making a fuss. Landing in one of the alleyways, Invincible and Miruko walk out to do their patrol. Passers-by noticed them wave and the heroes waved back. In the alleys, there were a few people on the phone saying a few words and disappearing into the back alleys. Patrolling for an hour, they didn't find any incidents, so they agreed to split up to hopefully lure out some desperate villains and criminals. Invincible warped away, leaving Miruko in the middle of the street. Cracking her neck, she leaps away, jumping between buildings to continue her patrol. Invincible warped into a back alley and used Gecko and Beast Boy to turn into a complex mutant, careful not to go too far and make himself intimidating. Izuku now looked like an anthropomorphic lizardman with sand-colored scales adorned with blunted spikes straining against the beat-up shirt, pants, and shoes made with item creation. Walking near the bar, Izuku wanted to lure out the people yesterday. Going past a dark alley, multiple pairs of hands quickly reached out and grabbed Izuku, covering his mouth with a moist cloth. Izuku managed to struggle out of the man's grip and turned around to face him. He sees three men in dark cloaks on the ground after being thrown off of him, watching him as if waiting for something. Izuku, feigning panic, he speaks to them. Who are you people? What did you do to me? The hooded men looked at each other and whispered. Why isn't the sedative working? He might have a tolerance, that mutant. Just give it a few more seconds to do its magic. Wah. Izuku's shut and he falls on the floor. The three men get up and dust themselves off while putting away the sedative. Geez, what quirk does that freak have? Whatever, tie him up and put him with the others. They pick up their new captive, restrain them. Using chains, and put him in a box, which was then placed onto a truck. The box only had a few holes on the top which allowed a small amount of light into it. Izuku opened his eyes and looked around to see that he was surrounded by other mutation quirk users. After a few minutes of a bumpy ride, they seemed to have reached their destination and began to unload their captives from the truck and onto a transport cart. They took their stock into a storeroom and began to unload. A few shrieks of fear could be heard and people were taken out and placed into steel cages. Faint sobbing could be heard as the kidnappers banged on the cages. Shut the fuck up. You just put this cage at the front of the line, freak. I at least expect you to understand that. The haulers got to Izuku's box and opened it, finding him inside still asleep. Picking him up by the collar, they throw him into the noisy cage, making him land roughly. Seeing that he was still asleep, one of the guards pulled out a cattle prod and used it on Izuku's neck. He made his body jerk violently as he faked a gasping scream before his body loosened, with his limbs trying to support his smoldering body. The other captive backed away from the sight, looking at it in fear and turning away as the guard looked at each and every one of them before scoffing. Turning around, he gets out and locks the cage tight. The other captive stopped tensing against the back wall and slowly approached the smoldering face-down boy. Before they could get close, the boy gets up causally and dusts himself off, seemingly unharmed by the electricity. Looking around the cage, he sees 4 other people looking at him in confusion along with the other cages. There were 10 cages in the room, each containing 5 people, and the CRC did not discriminate. It didn't matter what age or gender, all they deemed impure were captured. Are you not hurt? A child with small deer antlers and hoofed limbs spoke from a nearby cage. The others waited anxiously for the newcomer's response. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 61, Creature Rejection Clan. I'm okay. It's gonna take a lot more than a little shock to put me down. How long have you stayed here? The child, a little weirded out by the confidence, didn't answer. A bullman in a different cage chimed in. It's been about a week. Every day, one cage of people is taken out and brought to God knows where. Looking around with quirk sight and X-ray, he sees the CRC members gathering in what appears to be a hall. Some of their quirks were quite interesting, especially those that were standing on a raised platform. The ability to boost and heal in a radius would be helpful, along with a potential synergy for hacking. That, and there was someone in the basement with a very high quirk factor. Izuku walked towards the bars of the cage. Don't bother. If anything passes the bars, an alarm sounds and they'll be here in seconds. Getting near the bars, they bend open and allow him through. Some in the cages looked away, waiting for the alarms, but nothing happened except for all of their cages bending and twisting open in shock. They all opened their eyes at the sound and looked towards the obvious cause, the boy whose form was now shifting until it became someone they recognized. Invincible. Good, some of you know me. Invincible opens a warp gate to Mustafa police station and guides the kidnapped people through. After making sure everyone got through, he followed them out. Appearing at the back of the crowd of mutants, the police were already asking some of the adults why they were there. There were a few other people nearby, but they were just looking over at the small crowd curiously. Invincible walked to the front of the crowd, the police now noticing him. Invincible. These people were kidnapped, yes. Yeah, I'm gonna go back and capture the villains, so prepare a pretty big holding cell. Invincible immediately warps away, leaving behind the office he was talking to. The cops sighed. They were in for some major paperwork processing so many people. Appearing back inside the room of cages, Invincible takes out his phone and pings his location to the police station so they can sweep the building after he is done. Looking around with quirk sight and X-ray, he sees a few guards outside the room and near the entrance to the building and goes to capture them. The guards outside the room had large dark cloaks, which obscured their features. On their belt were the cattle prod and a radio. They had their backs to the room. Why the hell do we even keep these things again? Don't ask me, man. They don't tell us shit, but as long as they are cleansed, I have no complaints. Invincible walked out of the room, shocking the guards who immediately recognized him. They tried to alert the others, but they were quickly knocked out and stored. One of their radios suddenly activated. Entrance to door guard checking in. Invincible used Doppelganger to copy the guard's voice. All clear. Invincible began to warp around the building, capturing the guards and disabling the surveillance. With that task done, he moved on to the main course in the hall. As he got near the door, the guards weren't able to even yell before they were taken out. The door to the hall opened as Invincible's hair shimmered. Slice plus chronostasis. His hair shot out and struck each of the members, locking them in place. Walking up to the raised platform, the leaders of the faction looked at him with fear in their eyes as he placed his hand on a select few people. Mastermind taken. Quirk synergy, mastermind, hacking, technopathy. Energizer taken. Incense taken. Quirk synergy, incense, super regeneration, overhaul, rewind, muscle augmentation, body bulk, Horus. Purge taken. Pain taken. Infection taken. Quirk synergy, energy suck, infection, pain, food, debilitate. Seeing all of her comrades lose their birthright, she panicked, trying to get out of the effects of chronostasis. Her efforts were in vain as Invincible placed his hand on her head. Purity taken. Quirk synergy, adaptation, energizer, purity, limit breaker. Before chronostasis could wear off, everyone in the room was placed into storage. With the room emptied, Invincible had a look at the new synergies. Technopathy. Control of electronics and data. Horus. Heals all in a radius regardless of allegiance. The closer the someone is to the user, the faster the healing, with instant healing from skin contact. Quirk heals at the cost of user's muscle mass. Debilitate. People afflicted by the quirk feel tired, sick, have increased sensibility to pain, and are starving. User is also afflicted by the quirk, with the effects multiplying by the number of people affected. Limit breaker. Removes limiter on other quirks including safety limiters. Interested in limit breaker's effects, he used it on life force. Immediately, he feels a new resistance in his joints as his body locks in place, though he doesn't seem to age backwards. Moving around, he eventually gets used to the new resistance. Opening his quirk list, he sees a slight change in the quirk. Life Force Plus. Life Force Plus. Lifespan is now indefinite. Exponential joint stiffening based is on age. Effect dampened by sufficient musculature and regeneration of joints. Looking around, he finds a way into the basement. Walking down, he finds himself in what looks like a fantasy catacomb with stone brick walls and candles lighting the way. At the end of it was a wooden door with a metal handle. Opening the door, it led to a circular chamber that looked like a summoning room with an altar in the middle and a large coffin placed upright in the back which held the person with the large quirk factor. Strange, even this close I can't tell what quirk he has. Opening the coffin, he finds a man in a butler outfit, fingerless gloves, round monocle, and a wolf cut styled into a slick back ponytail. Wanting to find out what his quirk was, Invincible reached his hand towards the man. Before he could make contact, the man's eyes open and Invincible's right arm is chopped to bits. This surprises Invincible as nothing should be able to cut into him. The man gets up and jumps to the other side of the room with shimmering wires twirling around him. Invincible turns as his minced arm returns to him with the red tendrils leaving behind a trail of dried blood. Alucard. I see you've been busy. Who? Chapter 62, Before the Dawn. You don't fool me, Count. How long has it been since we've met? Decades. Centuries. Look, man, I'm not who you think I am. Do you even know where you are? What's your name? The man squints his eyes and tenses his hand. Wires wrapped around Invincible's torso, splitting him in half, but the halves don't get the chance to hit the ground before tendrils from both grabbed onto each other and reattached the two halves together. The men didn't look surprised by the development. Then how do you explain your undeath? Do you underestimate me that much that a slight change like that would hide you? Wires wrapped themselves on all of Invincible's limbs and tried to twist them off, but the limbs don't move. In fact, they don't get anywhere further than the green armor that surrounds him as they snap when Invincible swings his arms. The man shocked forms his wires into a spear and stabs at Invincible, but it stops when it lands on Invincible's chest and unravels. Invincible's eyes gain a red vertical pupil. Stop. The man freezes in place, his head still able to move. Invincible places his hand on the altar and the room morphs, giving the both of them a seat. Sit. Robotically, the man sits down with a scowl on his face. What is your name? The man is compelled to answer. Walter C. Dornez. Fact. Who is Alucard? He is a true vampire. The first to exist. Once known as Vlas Teeps. Fact. Dracula is real. Who would have thought? You've answered my question. It's fair that you ask yours. And why should I, monster? Just kill me and get it over with. I'm sure Integra would be happy to see my corpse. Nobody is dying today. I already beat everyone in the CRC and I just need to figure out why they have you down here and been apparently feeding you people with mutation quirks. Speaking of the CRC, give me a moment. A warp gate opens behind Invincible as he leaves a confused Walter stuck to a chair. After a few minutes, Invincible returns to an annoyed Walter still in his chair. Hopefully letting you sit there cooled you down. Now do you have any questions? Who are you? I'm Izuku Midoriya, otherwise known as the hero Invincible. What year is it? It's 2159, March 13th. Walter stays silent for a moment. Are we in Japan? Yes, we are. You teleported before. How? I have a quirk which creates warp gates that allow for instantaneous travel across any distance. Quirk, not power or ability. You don't know about quirks. You must have been in there for quite a while then. Quirks are abilities manifested at the age of 4 for 80% of the population, with the percentage still rising. They can range from a basic strength enhancer to matter manipulation. Everyone born in the last century should know of the term, so I assume you're a lot older than you look. I was born after the Great War in 1930. Fact. You really are an old-timer. How have you survived until now? Does it have anything to do with your quirk factor? I don't know what a quirk factor is, but I allowed a Nazi doctor to change me so that I had a chance to face Alucard. He turned me into an artificial vampire. Fact. Artificial. True vampires can only exist if they are aired by being bitten by a true vampire of the opposite gender and the bitten still virginal, or in a desperate state they willingly consume the blood of others after abandoning their faith. Fact. What if someone is bitten just for sustenance? Nothing will happen to them unless the vampire wills that they will be under their control, turning them into a ghoul. Ghouls are rotting corpses that follow the vampire's every command. Fact. Do you know where Alucard could be? No. After so many years he could have taken a number of forms, or he is in stasis waiting for his next master. Fact. Release. The resistance on Walter's body disappears as he slowly gets up. You're not going to go around killing anyone you see, are you? No. Unless they provoke me. Good. Now do you need blood to survive? Not entirely. I am able to consume normal food, but I will need to ingest blood from time to not go mad from blood hunger. Then would you be willing to consume mine? Why are you so ready to offer your blood? Do you think I won't betray you? You've been civil so far, not counting when you woke up. Invincible reached his arm out and it unraveled into tendrils which reached over to Walter's mouth. Walter hesitates, but the scent of blood makes him bite down on the appendage and he feels something change. The strain he felt from using his wires before was gone and the taste of a good cigarette and wine fell on his tongue. The memories of the hero in front of him began to reveal themselves. They showed him the boy's journey and his experiences. His power was overwhelming, maybe stronger than the Count. The world was completely different from what it was. Hellsing was gone. Millennium was gone. Iscariot was gone. All traces of vampirism were erased from common knowledge and merely relegated to folklore and myth. There was even a hero named after the thing who had the ability to control blood. After a few minutes, Walter pulls out a handkerchief, and dabs away the remaining traces of blood which had dried on his lip as the tendril returns to an arm. A warp gate opens behind him leading to the outside. Walking through he sees the same sunlight as he's seen before, though it was a bit brighter than he was used to as he was no longer in London. Some police tried to arrest the men but Invincible stopped them. Don't arrest him, I'll keep an eye on him. Just let me write the report so when you interrogate him you won't ask redundant questions. The next few hours were a bit of a blur for Walter as he was asked about his past by an office that claimed to be able to detect lies from speech. He wondered why children were still trained to be soldiers when there wasn't a major threat to their lives, but maybe it was so peaceful that this game of heroes and villains was just entertainment. At least that was his impression, as the heroes were more like celebrities of his time. Now inside a well-furnished office, he was sat on a couch with a tea in hand that he quite enjoyed. There must have been some advancement in tea making or this rodent was just that good. The rat's expression stiffened slightly as if knowing what he was thinking. I would prefer that you don't refer to me that way, Mr. Dornez. Ah. I apologize, I wasn't aware my thoughts were so obvious. This tea is quite amazing. No offense taken. There is much I am interested in that I hope you have answers to. Chapter 63, Millennium. After dropping off Walter with Nizu, Izuku decided to check in with the doctor to inquire if he knew of Alucard or the assault on London by Millennium, hoping to get more detailed information on them. Walking into the lab, the doctor was surrounded by other researchers looking over some clipboards and discussing something. Dr. Garaki turned and greeted his master. Afternoon, Master, what has brought you here? The knowledge that you might possess of the Millennium Organization and Alucard. The doctor was a bit shocked to hear those words. He dismissed the other researchers by waving his hand. Excuse us. Master, follow me. Garaki led Izuku to his personal office and began to dig out some documents. Placing them on the table, he allowed Izuku to look through them. Millennium was drafted by the Nazis during World War II as a long-term project to research the supernatural and replicate its effects in their soldiers, but their experiments were halted by a younger Walter and Alucard who was disguised as a little girl. During the assault, the top brass managed to escape the culling into South America with a small battalion and items stolen from Holocaust victims to help conceal themselves, helped along by the Vatican. The organization reappeared in 1999 when they attacked both America and London with an army of artificial vampires. The Vatican gathered to fight them off, but they were at a stalemate until Alucard appeared and consumed the ranks of both sides in the city, raising those he had drank from as a tidal wave of ghouls to destroy the troops of both the Vatican and Millennium. By the end of it, all members of Millennium were killed, yet their documents were saved and archived as a record of their delusion and existence. Garaki spoke as Izuku finished reading. Even as a young man, I was always interested in the research they had to alter the human genome. I scoured the world to look for data pertaining to it. It was their research that allowed me to successfully create the Nomus. People changed and altered to handle the strain of power and its consequences. Fact. Would access to more of Millennium's research expedite the process of reversing the nomification? Unfortunately, no. Millennium was only interested in altering people regardless of the effects. Their research was quite unethical, wasting many lives, but they found a key, Mina Harker, a sire of Alucard. Her corpse was dug up after centuries and it had yet to fully decay. The body still had the blood of a true vampire flowing through its veins, allowing Millennium to replicate some of Alucard's vampiric abilities. Her body was lost during the assault of the Fourth Reich. Fact. Has there been any info on the whereabouts of Alucard and Sarah's Victoria? If they are true vampires, then they should still be around. No. When I started my search, the Helsing organization was already disbanded after their leader Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingate's Helsing had passed of old age, not leaving behind an heir but allowing someone else to lead the organization for a few years before the British government cut their funding when the rise of quirks became prevalent. I would guess that they're somewhere near the UK, maybe Europe. Fact. Alright then. That was a bit less than I expected, but that's fine. How is the denomification coming along? Things are going steady. We are currently on animal trials trying to reverse the effect placed on mice, but there has yet been a successful result. Fact. And Nizu approved of it. I thought he would object. He did in the beginning, but this was the only way for the other researchers to study the process to find a way to reverse it somewhat ethnically. Fact. Okay, hopefully you'll get results soon. I should go. It seems the researchers have much to discuss with you. Yes, Master. I promise that you will not be disappointed. Fact. A warp gate opens behind Izuku and swallows him whole. Appearing back in Nizu's office, he finds it empty, leaving Izuku confused. I wasn't gone that long, was I? Looking around with quirk sight, he saw Walter's quirk factor in the gym Delta and some of the staff near him. I should probably figure out why vampirism looks like a quirk factor when there is no quirk. Warping into the gym, he sees Walter and Aizawa sparring with Nizu and Recovery Girl spectating in the observation room. The arena had a mess of shredded bandages, with Aizawa breathing heavily and cuts all over his body. The ground near them looked like someone had taken a blade to it, leaving gouges in the concrete floor. Aizawa ran at Walter with his dagger, trying to slash at him, but Walter weaved shields out of his wires to deflect the attacks until he got a hold of the knife blade, slicing it into pieces. Valiantly fought, hero. You would be quite a nuisance facing anyone else. Izuku lands next to Aizawa, places his hand on his shoulder and uses Horus. A green aura covers his body as the cuts immediately heal and the bags under his eyes disappear. He's never felt more awake. Wanted to stretch your legs, Walter? This vagabond wanted a show of my skills. Aizawa stood straighter, surprised by the newfound energy in his body. Thanks for the pep-up, Midoriya. Where the hell did you find him? In a dungeon. An incredulous expression appeared on Aizawa's face as Nizu could be seen walking out of the observation room with Recovery Girl. Alright Aizawa, let's see the damage. Getting closer, she sees that he is completely fine minus the missing bandages and damaged clothes. Looking over to Midoriya, everything becomes clear. The boy had gotten a new tool in his belt. We need to get you into the nurse's office. Izuku opens a warp gate and they all arrive there in an instant. Making Aizawa sit on the bed, Recovery Girl began her examination, checking for any defects that may have occurred during Izuku's healing. Comparing his condition to before he was healed, he was completely healed. In fact, he was better than was ever recorded. It was like he was biologically younger with how healthy he was now. Do you have a youthful healing quirk now, Midoriya? I do now. I got it during the raid on the CRC. You should leave a clone here. Your classmates have been intense as of late. Sure, but he will only use quirks to heal if it is an emergency. Because you don't want them to completely rely on you for healing. Nizu interjected. Yeah. My type of healing allows them to throw caution to the wind and fight until they drop. The only time it should be needed is if they are hurt badly by a villain or need to train to be stronger in a short time. It has been a swell time talking about the boy's abilities, but what will be done with me? I don't assume you'll allow me in the public. How about a teaching position? No need for a veteran like you to still be on the field. Walter's brow twitched at the mention of his age, but he considered the offer. Take your time. In the meantime, you can observe the students at your discretion. It may help you come to a decision. If the whole teaching thing doesn't work out, you could also help me track down Alucard and Sarah's. This perks his interest, yet he doesn't immediately make a decision. Seeming surprised by his own hesitance, he gets up and leaves unimpeded. Chapter 64, Ruse. After leaving a clone in Recovery Girl's office, Izuku went to his personal gym as he had to test out the last two synergies he got, which were Debilitate and Technopathy. Walking into the gym, he stood in the middle of it and closed his eyes, activating Technopathy. The darkness of his closed eyes remained, but wire meshes of wires and terminals lit the dark world. Flows of binary and electricity could be seen, as well as pulses of distorted air representing the Wi-Fi upstairs. Opening his eyes, the meshes remained, but at lower opacity. He could now see how each wire powered or supported each item in the gym along with the building. Following the wires, he finds his computer and accesses it remotely, with a screen appearing in front of him along with a keyboard. Izuku walked to his room where the computer was, with the screen still following him, and he saw that the computer remained off. Izuku then warped to the middle of the Sea of Japan, still followed by the screen of his computer, which he still had full control of. Looking underwater, he sees the undersea cable line which connects Japan and Russia. Tapping into the line, he found he had access to all devices connected to its services, as tens of millions of screens appeared around him, stretching into the horizon. Dismissing the screens, Izuku warps back into the gym and produces some overhaul clones. Activating Debilitate, the clones stumble but try to keep themselves up as they are sweating and becoming gaunter. Izuku falls onto his knees as his body splits open, allowing tendrils to writhe around him before they lunge and stab into the clones with newly formed sharp metal blades, making the clones dissipate. Without a target, Debilitate deactivates, which allows Izuku to try and get his body in order, but it doesn't listen as the tendrils refuse to retract. I'm starving. That's new. Using item creation, it generates a large mound of flesh, and the tendrils immediately converge upon it, tearing the mound into pieces. The tendrils mutated mouths of sharp, jagged teeth and consumed the now shredded flesh. After a few minutes, the floor was clear of all signs of the feast, with Izuku's body returning to what it once was. Generating another mound, he tested the quirk again with the same amount of clones. The clones stagger again, the same with Izuku, but the amount of tendrils released was about half of what it was. Before the tendrils could move, Izuku used Horus to try and quell his hunger, which worked a charm as the tendrils obediently retreated back into his body. The mound of flesh disappeared into dust using decay as Izuku solidified his findings. Technopathy allowed a complete view and control of technology regardless of range, while Debilitate was best for one-on-one fights, with using it on large groups needed to be trained to not cause unnecessary causalities. With that done, Izuku returned to the public to resume his patrol, though that was kinda a moot point, as with the recent capture of the CRC, the villains had gone into hiding, with only small muggings taking place. The next day, Walter seemed to have made up his mind. He would stay in UA as a teacher specializing in information gathering and time management, but he wanted to be in the loop when Alucard was found. Izuku began his search for Alucard within Japan, just in case he was brought here like Walter, but unfortunately, he was not. With his whereabouts currently unknown, Izuku gets in contact with La Brava through Nizu to look through over 100 years of records to determine where he might be. With the search now out of his hands, he fell back into the routine of going to UA, patrol, and Rumi. Izuku wanted to search outside of Japan himself, but the Japanese government was not willing to let their strongest out for something as trivial as a search. Now that the CRC was mostly gone with a few fringe members scattered across Japan, the Inhuman Supremacy group was moving to get closer to him, as they believed that Invincible was at least sympathetic to their cause. Their protests and campaigns were getting more and more violent, leading to property damage, and heroes needed to mediate. Invincible and Miruko were doing their usual patrol, stopping for a snack, as there were no incidents so far, though there was a high concentration of emitter and transformation quirk users hidden in areas near them, as if waiting for something. Patrolling into the center of the mass, Izuku receives a convenient call from the hero system that informs heroes of urgent incidents. A Nomo breakout had happened in Nagoya, and they were tearing the city apart. Looking around with X-ray, he sees the emitter quirk users looking tensed at their phone or out of windows at Invincible. Wanting to see their plan in motion, Invincible decides to go along with the ruse. "Miruko, I'm needed in Nagoya. Just go, I'm sure I'll be fine. Been a while since I could stretch my legs." Nodding, Invincible warps away, leaving an excited Miruko who was getting warmed up as a crowd of people began to surround her. Invincible appeared above Nagoya and saw the city with a few pillars of smoke coming from multiple buildings. People were running away from what appeared to be Nomu, but they were anything but convincing. The FOMO were villains in disguise who had strength enhancers or transformation/emitter quirks. Warping the civilians to a safe house, Invincible sends multiple clones to the smoke and lands in front of the FOMOs closest to him, who visibly flinched upon his arrival. "For hired thugs, you're not very good at acting. Did your employers tell you why you were doing this?" The villains are compelled to answer. We are to attack and show the world that we, the pure, are best. Fiction. Yeah, not happening. The large Foma rushed at Invincible while the other shot fire needles. The large Foma kept punching at Invincible, but it was having no effect, yet he didn't stop. The same was happening to the fire needles, which broke upon contact with Invincible's hero costume. I can at least commend you both for your commitment to try and slow me down and distract me, but I think we're about done here. With a wave of his hand, the large villain was knocked into the other, making them both pass out and for their disguises to fall off. Invincible then used Overhaul to fix the damaged buildings. After warping the villains to a gathering site prepared by one of the clones, he opened the hero system and reported the incident as a false alarm. It was just the remaining members of the CRC pulling a Hail Mary. Invincible warps back into the air overlooking the city. Seeing it now repaired, he warped the civilians back to where they were before the attack. The citizens looked up to see Invincible floating in the air and cheered, thanking him for his help. Giving them a salute goodbye, he warps away to the villain holding area outside the station to help the officers contain and process the villains arrested. After a few minutes, with the processing done, Invincible bids the officers farewell and warps back above where he left Miruko. Looking down, he sees her next to a mound of unconscious bodies, still fighting an ever-coming swarm of bodies. Turning into a small fly with Beast Boy, he lands on the side of a building and waits for the eventual big boss to show themselves. Chapter 65, Deluded Cause. After 10 minutes, finally, the big guns arrive. Miruko turned to them, barely winded, with a light sweat and a smile on her face. Finally, you came out of your foxholes. The final vanguard consisted of 2 people, a man and a woman. The man's quirk was empowerment via the suffering of those around him, and considering the veritable pile of bodies, he should be pretty strong, while the woman's quirk was air density manipulation, which was pretty simple, but seeing as she came out last, she must have a good grasp of its capabilities. The men rushed forward and punched the ground, destroying the asphalt. The ground cracked and turned jagged and uneven, making it difficult to get good footing, as the floor could easily give making movement less effective. Miruko jumped away, but she seemed to hit a ceiling in the air, making her fall, priming her for the punch to the side, which sent her through a wall into a nearby building. How'd you like that, mutant? Miruko leaps out of the hole with a kick aimed at the man, but she feels her feet land on a surface mid-flight, so she kicks off of it and lands on the ground. I think you're going soft on me. Does my appearance bother you so much? Shut up, freak. You should not have used such temptation to corrupt the pure. So you do find me alluring? Then stop holding back and fight me like a man. Miruko disappeared, making the villains look around to pinpoint her location, but it was too late as Miruko appeared above the men. Luna collapse. The kick landed on the villain's shoulder and caused a large shockwave, sending the villain into the ground, destroying the road and smashing the windows on the buildings around them. The dust kicked up by the attack cleared, and in the middle of the road was a large crater with the male villain pressed down by Miruko in it, embedded in the dirt and stone. The villain tried to move their arms to strike at Miruko, but she restrained both of his arms by standing on them. Now above the villain, Miruko bends back a bit, then forward, and slams her head against the villains, finally making the man pass out. Invincible got a great angle of the move, which embarrassed him, making him look away until Miruko stood back up. Miruko, with a smile, looked up to the female villain floating in the air with an air platform that was revealed as smoke and dust collided with it, outlining it. The villain swung her arm at Miruko, making an invisible slash cut through the dust. Miruko dodged to the side as an air blade flew past her, gouging a line on the ground. The villain continued to shoot air slashes at Miruko, but she was too fast for any of them to land. Miruko did try to get close to the villain, but an air platform would appear and get in her way. After a few minutes, Miruko was getting frustrated and the villain looked tense, occasionally looking around as if looking for something. Taking advantage of their distraction, Miruko tries to lunge toward the villain, but she doesn't even get off the ground as a platform appears in her way. Recoiling from the bump, a stabbing sensation was felt in her calves. Looking down, she sees a syringe stabbed into her calves by one of the unconscious villains she had defeated before. A pulsing pain ran through her body, making her fall to her knees as the female villain floated down right in front of her. How does it feel, Mutie? It's freeing, isn't it? You're now finally pure. The voice she heard was more muffled than usual. What the hell are you going on about? You mutants are stupider than I thought. Don't you recognize the syringe? The same one Envy was shot by in Tartarus. Miruko reached up to her head and felt that her rabbit ears were gone. She then looked in her peripheral vision and saw her hair turning from white to a raven black. You're perfect for Envy now, but without a quirk, someone like you could never keep up with him. Now that you're out of the running, Envy can finally notice what he has been missing. I'll teach him to love what he will have with me. He might be sad about you not being there, but what does he know? I can't wait to get close to him. I'll show him the charm of a real woman, and he'll. The woman began to feel herself up with hearts in her eyes as she rubbed her thighs. She suddenly felt a hand on her shoulder, so she turned around to see Invincible in all of his glory. Darling, you're here. We have so much to dash. Invincible grabs her neck and lifts her off her feet. Didn't know you were into this. You've done this with her, haven't you? Don't worry, I'm much better, yo. The pressure around her neck tightens as she finally takes a good look at Invincible, but he wasn't looking at her. Instead, he was looking at Miruko with his hand outstretched with a golden glow. Miruko suddenly felt her hearing clear and looked up to see Invincible, who had a guilty look on his face. The villain was squirming in his hold, looking angrily at the now healed Miruko. Sorry, you had to endure that. Why did you heal that bitch? I am perfect for you. With struggling breaths, the villain interrupted. Before she could continue to speak, she felt an unbearable hunger come upon her as the pain around her neck increased exponentially. Did I anger you, Envy? I was just speaking my mind. Invincible looked back at the villain, who expected him to answer her, but he only looked at her with annoyance before she felt her mouth fuse shut. She started to panic, clawing at her now sealed mouth, trying to cut it open. She tried to use her quirk, but the familiar awareness of the air around her was gone. Before she could try too long, her limbs bulged and burst into a mist of blood before collapsing back into her body. Her limbs were now gone, and in their place were smooth areas where limbs once connected. Invincible dropped the now gaunt villain on the jagged floor face first and walked towards Miruko, pulling her into a hug, sitting on the floor of the crater. Izuku, you didn't have to do that to her. Don't try to hide it, Rumi. Even if you don't believe a single word out of that thing's mouth, it would still hurt to hear that. Tears threatened to leak out of Rumi's eyes, so Izuku tucked her head into his chest as the tears flowed. Izuku held her close and whispered as she let her feelings out. The villain on the ground writhed and squirmed, looking at the sight of her men with the mutant. The area around Izuku began to morph and move, restoring the buildings and roads to what they once were. A clone leaks off of Izuku as he warps away, leaving the clone to deal with the villains on the ground. Chapter 66, Inhumans. Izuku opens his eyes the next morning in Rumi's bed, with Rumi sleeping right on top of him, hugging him tightly, her head buried in the crook of his neck. Izuku was currently shirtless, as Rumi preferred the skin contact and warmth when they slept together. Slowly sitting up, he repositioned her so he could sit up a bit while not disturbing her sleep, and wrapped his arms around her. After half an hour, Rumi's ears fluttered and brushed against his cheek as she woke up and moved her head slightly to see Izuku looking down at her with a slightly worried expression. Feeling better? Instead of answering, she pulls Izuku into a deep kiss. After a few seconds, they separate and she lays her head on his chest. Yeah, thanks for this. What kind of boyfriend would I be if I didn't do something like this? Rumi blushes, pointing her gaze down. She saw that Izuku was shirtless, only wearing shorts, while she was wearing an oversized white shirt and spats. Feeling her chest against his with only the fabric of the shirt made her blush harder as a small sliver of smoke emanated from her head. The door to the bedroom suddenly opened, making the two look at who had invaded their space. Ryukyu slowly poked her head into the room carefully. Rumi, I saw what happened yesterday. Are you O-? Finally seeing the scene, a bright blush appeared on her face as she retreated back behind the quickly closed door, and considering the two's current state of dress, her reaction was reasonable. A small scream was heard outside of the door as Ryukyu shrieked out of embarrassment. After a few minutes, the three were now sitting on the couch. Izuku and Rumi sat like they were caught by their parents, and Ryukyu sat at the other side, not knowing what to say. Rumi gave Ryukyu annoyed a side eye, which Ryukyu responded with a guilty look. Izuku breaks the awkward silence. So, what did you mean you saw what happened yesterday? I think it's best if you just watched. Ryukyu picked up the remote and turned on the TV. Video of Invincible was released yesterday of him dispatching a villain in a disturbing manner. We will be broadcasting a censored edition, though we recommend parents and the faint of heart to change the channel before the video begins. Some of us in the studio will be doing the same. After a few seconds, the video was shown. The person recording was in a building, recording from a window. The villain could be heard speaking somewhat clearly considering the distance. Invincible showed up and dealt with the villain before picking up Maruko, leaving a clone and warping away. In the footage, it could be clearly heard that the villain, now identified as Chiyo Hanamura, a member of the splintered creature rejection clan with the quirk Irregular, with an obsession and delusion of the hero Invincible, believing that she should be the hero's lover, and orchestrated an assault on the heroine Maruko to, in her words, remove the impure. This action had enraged Invincible as he had deformed the stalker. Many in the public have voiced the opinion that the villain dealt with justly considering the circumstances, but there are those who disagree with the severity of the punishment dealt. A montage of people who were near the incident was shown as they stated what they thought. Most just thought it was justified what he did to the villain, while on the other side thought it was inhumane to leave the villain in that state. Ryukyu, feeling like they had gotten the gist of it, turned the TV off. That villain said some pretty horrible things about you. I wanted to know how you were doing. I'm doing better now, Ryuko. Someone like that wouldn't get in my head. With a motherly look, Ryuko responds. Rumi, if it didn't hurt you wouldn't have to be teleported away. Rumi, not knowing what to say, stayed silent. At least you had someone to get you out before you got revealed as a crybaby. As if I would get caught like that. The two women continued their light banter as Izuku discreetly slipped away to make breakfast for all of them. With the whole thing behind them, they got back to what they usually do, though Ryuko insisted that she and Rumi patrolling without him. Knowing that they wanted to speak privately, Izuku hugs Rumi goodbye before warping away. Appearing above the city, Izuku looked around to see if there were any signs of the Inhuman Supremacy Group members around. Not seeing anything, he opened the Hero Alert system on his phone and looked for recent protests or incidents. Previously they were active around the Sendai region, so Invincible began his patrol there. Now above the area, he sees a large city, and using quirk sight he sees a large contingent of mutation quirk users all across the city. There was a small gathering of them in a square. The leader of the gathering was a man with a bare head and arms with sharp claws. Invincible landed on a street nearby, greeted some people on their way to work, and walked to the gathering. A few of the members spotted him and informed others in the crowd. The knowledge of his presence reached the leader, who quickly spotted Invincible and walked up to him. Invincible, may I ask why you are here? I've been hearing on the grapevine that a group of mutant protesters have been destroying public property. I'm here to make sure that doesn't happen. You wouldn't be familiar with this group responsible, would you? The bearman is compelled. I do know who they are with. Fact. The other mutants in the gathering started shifting, looking for an opportunity to slip away. Would you kindly tell me the name of this group? It's the Inhuman Supremacy Group. Ah, of course it's them. And you are part of that group, yes? Yes. Bring them here. What? Bring their leaders here. I'm sure you remember what happened yesterday. After all, you were going to use it to further your cause. The bearman nervously took his phone out and called some people. It only took a few seconds of quiet whispering before he hung up. He looked toward Invincible, who still had a calm smile on his face. They are on their way. What are you so nervous about? I just wanted to have a chat is all. You can go about your protest while they're arriving. Invincible warps to the top of a nearby building and sits at its edge overlooking the gathering. The crowd tried to continue their preparation, but the extra scrutiny from above was quite distracting. Chapter 67, A Warning. After a few minutes, the buildings near the square were now saturated with mutation quirk users before a car stopped nearby. From the car, a large wolfman and a man with a gas mask covering half of his face get out of the car. The two people walked toward the bearman and spoke quietly before turning to face Invincible, who was sitting on the ledge of a building. The wolfman, flanked by the bearman and the person with the gas mask, walked to Invincible, who simply pushed himself off of the building into free fall and landed on the sidewalk as if he had just walked out of the building he was just on. Now on the ground, the wolfman stepped forward. Invincible, you wanted to speak with me. I did, though I was wondering why many members of your group are gathered in the buildings around here. They were already coming here for the protest. Don't mind them. If you have questions, please speak them. I'll answer to the best of my ability. Fact. There have been reports on your group's protests having become more prominent, to say the least. Some of your members have been arrested and they say the strangest things. Like what, if I may ask? How mutants are the next step in evolution, but surely they hold the extremes of your group's beliefs. Of course. We of the Inhuman Supremacy Group merely advocate for the better treatment and image of our kind. Fiction. You said that the people in the building were a part of the protest, yes. I'll stick around when the protest begins. Hopefully, nothing happens today. By all means, hero. You may join us if you'd like. After all, you are a mutant too. Your word may be the catalyst that changes people's minds. Fact. I'll keep that in mind. With that, the leader leaves and joins the rest of the crowd. After another half an hour, their preparations were complete and they began their protest. The people in the buildings before joined and now the crowd was quite large and packed. The ground rumbled slightly as they marched toward the city square holding signs which advocated their equality. No one stepped out of line as if they were all robots obediently following orders. The protest lasted until the evening when the group needed to return home and rest. The leader looked to be still full of energy, looking restless as he clenched his hands. Invincible warps down in front of the leaders. That protest went without incident. Good job. The outliers must have been removed from the previous arrest. Indeed. The Wolfman answered without much enthusiasm. Hey, cheer up. Even if the government hasn't heard your plight, the public surely has. The media people that were here looked disappointed that nothing happened. Keep on like this, I'm sure you'll get what you want eventually. Thank you, hero. Don't mention it. Invincible opened a warp gate behind him and turned to walk in. With his back turned to the leaders, he leaves some parting words. It was a great play you put on. You'd have a great career in acting. The hero leaves, leaving the Wolfman standing in front of the city square looking at the empty space where the hero once stood with a face full of bared teeth and clenched bleeding palms. Time passed, and the underworld had gotten a lot quieter since Invincible had been involved in many falls of different organizations. Due to the fact that the method by which Invincible infiltrated these organizations was unknown, it caused everyone to be extra cautious with every move they made. No one dared overstep their boundaries and shine a spotlight on themselves. Some of them even halted the international shipping contracts they had with other black markets, fearing what could be slipped in from them. Jiren, while happy to give the good news to his sire, was finding it difficult to get jobs and information as people were getting tight-lipped. The Inhuman Supremacy Group was still going strong and even got a few concessions, such as the outlawing of segregation in buildings and including accommodation for mutants in future building plans. They condemned the actions of their predecessors and vowed to not allow people like them to represent the group. Life went on as usual for Izuku, and if you asked him, it was quite boring. Anyone who could be a threat is too scared to fight him, and All for One had yet to make his supposed comeback. Honestly, Izuku wanted to see what plan he could cook up with the retaliation nullifiers shackled in his head. The new school year had come and now Class 1A was now Class 2A. The year final was pretty rough for everyone, but they were able to pass with flying colors due to the efforts of Momo and occasionally Izuku, who helped them with subjects they were weakest in, but all of that was behind them now as the class was in Gym Gamma with Aizawa. Next to Aizawa was a man the class didn't recognize and a woman they faintly remembered as the hero forced to kill by the former HPSC. Good morning, Class 2A, we have new instructors as of today. Aizawa gestured to the new teacher, cueing them to introduce themselves. I am Lady Nagant and my quirk is Rifle. Some of you may recognize me from a few months back when Midoriya sprung me from Tartarus. A few of the faces in the class lit up in recognition. The man was the next to introduce himself. My name is Walter C. Dornez and I worked as a bounty hunter and butler in London. Any questions before we begin? Kaminari raised his hand. Where did you find a hot version of yourself? With that thought put in the class's heads, they looked between the two teachers and noticed the dark dress and similar stern look. Other than that, Walter looked well-kempt and put together. I have no idea how he came in contact with UA, but I know who brought him here. Aizawa's eyes were locked on Izuku, which answered their question. What quirk does Dornez have? Wire creation. Any other serious questions? No, then let's get to today's training.